In front of an imposing castle shrouded by dark clouds, the famed heroes' party is prepared to raid the structure. With resolve in their hearts, the party advances, determined to defeat the demon lord and end his reign. The massive doors of the castle creak open, revealing countless red eyes glowing. As the heroes step inside, waiting for them is not the demon lord, but one of his powerful lackeys, Yoki, who stands in their way. Makana attacks without hesitation, launching a blazing red fireball. The spell dissipates and Yoki belittles the attack. Raven charges next, swinging his sword. Yoki counters with a powerful kick that sends him flying. Yuga steps forward, supported by Cecilia, who helps power his attack. He unleashes a thunderous strike, but Yoki counters it and easily overwhelms the attack with his own magic. The heroes take a direct hit, and all of them eventually lose consciousness. A bright yellow-orange light gathers in his hand as he begins absorbing their remaining energy. His actions pause when his gaze lands on Cecilia. Her unconscious expression, which appears as if sleeping, captivates him. Lost in thought, he fails to notice the arrival of his subordinates until they loudly announce themselves. They bluntly ask whether they should finish off the heroes and also tease him for ogling one of the girls. Rather than killing them, he orders the heroes to be thrown outside near a nearby human village. Though his subordinates complain and warn him that he could be reprimanded again for not killing the heroes, they follow his command. 1 month later, Yoki faces the demon lord and his subordinate, Zykill. Zykill voices his displeasure since, despite the heroes' party's repeated defeats, they still keep challenging Yoki. The demon lord, annoyed with the heroes' party, tells Yoki that he will have his subordinates kill them off since Yoki seems unwilling to do it. Knowing his own subordinates won't be able to stand against the heroes, Yoki insists on taking care of the problem since he also worries about Cecilia's safety. As he leaves the throne room, Yoki reflects on his actions. He knows that sparing the heroes may endanger their lives in the future. Yet he also believes that they possess the potential to defeat the demon lord. With each passing day, the world inches closer to falling under demonic rule. On their next encounter, the heroes launch a coordinated attack. Raven and Yuga strike together, attempting to overwhelm Yoki with sheer force, but Yoki throws them off toward a wall, dealing significant damage. Makana raises her staff and fires a barrage of magic attacks. The spells strike Yoki directly, yet they fail to leave even a scratch. Yoki notices that Cecilia has moved to heal the wounded. Yoki watches her movements closely, captivated once again by her beauty. Despite their recovery, he laughs, mocking their efforts and warning them that they will only be swallowed by darkness again. Yuga prepares another attack, asking Cecilia for support. As he moves to strike Yoki, a bright light and smoke signal that the attack is connected. But as the smoke clears, Yoki stands unharmed. Yuga is shocked because it is supposed to be their party's destiny to defeat the demon lord. Seeing the party's determination, Yoki proposes a negotiation. He offers to let the heroes pass if they leave Cecilia behind, gesturing to her. Yuga immediately refuses, but Makana urges him to think of the world's salvation, as it holds more importance than a single person. Yuga is still hesitant to abandon a party mate, but Cecilia tells him to accept the offer, insisting she will be fine. With hesitation, Yuga decides to take Yoki's offer, and the heroes proceed to the demon lord's room. Left alone, Cecilia confronts Yoki, demanding to know why he needed her to stay. Yoki's expression changes to a timid one, but Cecilia decides to attack him. Yoki is shocked by her hostility, as her attack just bounces off him. To calm her down, he raises his hand, calling for a pause, and introduces himself. He reveals that he has no intention of killing her. Cecilia is confused by his words, but cautiously asks him what he means. Taking a deep breath, he confesses that he fell in love with her at first sight and would like to go out with her. Cecilia stands frozen in shock before bowing her head and apologizing, refusing his proposal. Crushed, Yoki lowers his defenses and falls to the ground, declaring that he should just die now. Cecilia prepares another attack, but Yoki makes no attempt to resist, which makes Cecilia uneasy, so she demands to know his reason. Yoki explains that her rejection means he no longer has a reason to live. If he were to be left alive, he would still be stuck in the castle and can only leave if he has orders to attack human settlements, which he doesn't want to do. Cecilia is puzzled because demons are supposed to find joy in bringing terror to humans. Yoki explains that he is actually a human from a different dimension, but was reincarnated into this demonic body. Though he possesses the power to defeat the demon lord, doing so would force him to inherit the title. Yoki shares that living as a lackey under the demon lord felt isolated and purposeless. He has spent his days alone. Meeting Cecilia changed everything. For the first time since becoming a demon, he felt alive. Moved by his words, Cecilia urges him to live and use his power for good. She offers him a chance to leave the castle and join the outside world. After the demon lord's defeat, the kingdom of Clarinus erupts in celebration. King Darts declares a 3-day celebration for a Victory Memorial Day to properly celebrate the heroes' party's success. Just outside the kingdom's walls, Yoki prepares to fit in and breaks his horn. Meanwhile, the heroes' party is in a parade. Mikana shares her joy at their success with Yuga. Yuga credits their victory to Cecilia, who gives him a nervous smile. Seeing this interaction, Mikana feels a little jealous. Yoki finally enters town and registers at the Adventurers Guild, disguising himself as a human. Clayman is manning the reception desk and struggles to find the form Yoki needs. He eventually finds it and shows Yoki's guild card, indicating Yoki is at F rank. He explains the ranking system and how it usually takes a month to move up a rank. Before handing Yoki his card, Clayman emphasizes keeping the guild cards safe, since it is a hassle to reissue, especially in the next 3 days since a festival is ongoing. He complains that they are currently understaffed and does not want to do the work himself. This makes Yoki think Clayman is lazy. He finally hands Yoki the card and introduces himself. At the Kingdom's Inn, Yoki checks his earnings for the day and notes that he has made a lot of money. His new goal is to increase his cash and rank, and once he has a stable life, confess to Cecilia again. He laughs maniacally in glee, determined to make their love work. In a week, rumors circulate about a person who has been crazily climbing up the ranks. Yoki lazily enters the guild and hands Clayman a bunch of quests he would like to take. Clayman is annoyed that Yoki always makes him do the paperwork and complains that he should approach the female receptionist instead. Yoki refuses, saying he has grown attached to Clayman and would rather talk to him since he surprisingly works fast. Due to his impressive rise in the rank ladder, Clayman starts interrogating Yoki about his identity. Looking away, Yoki counters that he is only a normal novice adventurer. Clayman mentions that it is odd since Yoki ranked up from F to D in a mere week. Despite this, Clayman tells Yoki that he investigated the matter and is sure Yoki did not cheat. Their conversation is cut short by a cloaked figure who requests that Yoki's quests be cancelled. Both Yoki and Clayman recognize her as Cecilia, and Cecilia shushes Clayman since he almost revealed her identity. Cecilia has important matters to discuss with Yoki and invites him to her family estate so they can talk. They ride a coach to her estate, where 2 guards are eagerly awaiting Cecilia's return. One guard is surprised when Yoki is the first to exit the coach, so he immediately threatens him. Cecilia comes to Yoki's defense, saying that he is her friend. However, Yoki is feeling a bit disappointed since he was just labeled as a friend. In the estate's sitting room over warm cups of tea, Cecilia apologizes for not being able to meet Yoki earlier, which Yoki says is fine since he is busy being an adventurer. Yoki is even surprised by how Cecilia was able to find him. Cecilia explains that it wasn't hard since he is currently the talk of the town for ranking up so fast. This causes a smug grin to form on Yoki's face. However, Cecilia then tells him to quit the Adventurers Guild. This shocks Yoki, but Cecilia continues by saying that even if the Demon Lord is gone, other threats are emerging. She predicts the next one might be a war between nations. The signs of a possible war are already showing up with the hero receiving a lot of engagement offers. Status, money, and marriage are ways many nations may use as resources at their disposal to gather military strength and manpower. Since Yoki ranked up unbelievably faster than most people, he may become an S-rank adventurer, which will make him attractive to be used by nations to conquer the world. Cecilia also worries that his demonic powers might be discovered, which people might find a threat, and they would try to kill him. Since she is asking him to quit, Yoki will have a problem making a living. So Cecilia proposes hiring him personally, but admits she doesn't make enough to pay him the money an S-rank adventurer would earn. However, Cecilia bows and promises to do what she can as long as he accepts her offer. She even adds that this is for the sake of the country's peace. Yoki is shocked but recovers and declares that he will never serve another country, even if they were to throw beautiful women for him to marry. Confidently, he says that he only has eyes for Cecilia. This earns a laugh and Cecilia feels relief since she has nothing to worry about. She allows Yoki to stay with the Adventurers Guild with the promise that he is to stay low-key. Cecilia's mother, Celia, soon arrives and joins their discussion. Celia apologizes on behalf of their rude guards and assures Yoki that they will be punished by her maid, Sophia. Yoki believes the guards won't repent for getting scolded, but is shocked when Sophia asks Celia how many bones she should break. Getting to the point of the matter of her appearance, Celia asks Sophia to leave the room and asks Cecilia if she has already shared with Yoki that she received a lot of engagement offers, even one coming from Yuga. Irritated with this knowledge, Yoki kicks up a fuss and Cecilia calms him down. She shares that she turned down all offers, including the heroes. Celia figures out that Yoki also likes her daughter. Embarrassed to be found out, Yoki scratches his head. Celia asks him if he's interested in marrying Cecilia. Caught off guard, Yoki looks at Cecilia and sees her downcast eyes. He apologizes, saying that he will only confess again to Cecilia once he gets a stable life through his adventuring quests and wants to respect Cecilia's wishes. Celia puts on an annoyed expression for not accepting an offer, but eases her expression and tells him that he has passed since there was no way she was going to give Cecilia so easily. She moves to leave and tells Yoki to get along with Cecilia, and that he is always welcome in their home. Yoki and Cecilia go outside to chat a little. Yoki wonders if he truly left a good first impression since it is important for him because he met Cecilia's family. Yoki then requests if he can call Cecilia by her name. Cecilia agrees and wants to call Yoki by his name as well. Yoki shouts in joy since this means his first real progress with his relationship with Cecilia. A red streak of light emerges from the forest. A monster, a cockatrice, launches several attacks at Yoki. He successfully evades deep into the forest, effortlessly stepping back from each powerful attack. The cockatrice screams, chasing after him to an open area. Yoki prepares a spell just as the cockatrice is about to attack. Before the cockatrice attacks, Yoki casts his spell, defeating it. Yoki successfully collects the monster's feathers, completing the quest. He feels proud of himself because the quest should have taken a week, but he only needed a day to do it. Suddenly, Yoki gets attacked by his old comrades since they do not recognize him. He calls out to them and Seek is the first to recognize that he is Yoki. They express their relief because they thought he was an adventurer on a hunt. Yoki doesn't have the time to provide answers when Duke goes straight to asking him questions about his whereabouts and human-like appearance. Yoki and Seek calm Duke down while Happiness calmly asks for an explanation. Yoki proudly explains that he had confessed to Cecilia, but had gotten rejected. Now he chooses to live his life as a human adventurer. After he recounts his events, he advises his previous subordinates to lead the life they want. His subordinates refuse, adamant about following him and wanting to know about Cecilia. Yoki scratches his head, worried about their identities getting exposed. The three counter that if Yoki can adapt, then they can too. Seeing no way out, Yoki resigns himself to their wishes and tells them to prepare. Yoki brings his subordinates to Cecilia's estate. Instead of a welcome, Cecilia scolds Yoki for plucking Happiness feathers for a human disguise. Yoki kneels, asking for forgiveness. Over tea, Cecilia finds out that her three new guests were former subordinates of Yoki. Duke explains that they are a Dullahan, Harpy, and Pixie, respectively. Duke wants to remove his head, but they had already attached his helmet and armor, so it won't fall off. Yoki complains about Duke's chattiness since Dullahans don't talk as much. Duke calmly tells them that his love for talking is originally Yoki's fault. He tells Cecilia that Yoki used to be hard to talk to. Even Zaichir finds Yoki troublesome since he did not want to follow orders and remained in his room. When Duke attempted to forcibly correct Yoki's behavior, his head was thrown and screamed at. Since then, he had greatly admired Yoki. Cecilia is honestly surprised at their backstories as Duke shares that Happiness and Seek also have the same respect for Yoki. However, when he turns to look for them, he notices that they are gone. Yoki wonders if the two went inside the manor, which could spell trouble for them if their identities are exposed. The three of them begin searching the manor's grounds. They cross paths with Celia, with Seek sleeping on her lap. Yoki admits that Seek is his friend and asks if Celia finds him a bother. Celia dispels his worries, saying that she loves kids and wanted to take care of him once he got tired from playing. Cecilia asks Celia about Happiness' whereabouts. Thinking about it, she recalls that Happiness was taken away by Sophia. Inside the manor, Sophia teaches Happiness to curtsy in a maid uniform. Yoki and the rest rush in and find out that Happiness is now employed as the new maid. Yoki asks why Happiness is wearing a maid outfit in the first place, since she is Yoki's friend and a guest. Sophia turns to Happiness for an explanation, which she clears with a short answer. Sophia deeply apologizes for the confusion. When Yoki asks Happiness to change her clothes, Happiness refuses and expresses her interest in the job. Her reply puzzles the whole group, but seeing the determination in Happiness' eyes, Sophia invites her for a tour of the servants' quarters. With Happiness settled at Cecilia's manor, her old group and Yoki bid her goodbye. While they are sad, they are also happy that Happiness has found her calling, and the fact that they can visit her puts them at ease. While the others express their joy, Celia whispers to Yoki that Cecilia barely has time to rest. She shares that she'll have her daughter take the day off tomorrow, asking Yoki to spend time with her. The next day, Yoki waits outside the inn where he stays. A carriage arrives shortly, and the door opens to reveal Cecilia in casual clothes, a different outfit from her usual. Mesmerized, Yoki compliments Cecilia's glasses, which she uses as a disguise, hiding her identity as a member of the hero's party. Yoki realizes she lives a tough celebrity life. Cecilia apologizes for dragging Yoki along, which he casually brushes off, promising her a great experience. Cecilia giggles at this, looking forward to the day. They walk beside each other in town. A sign for a new cake offering catches Cecilia's attention. They peer inside a cafe, marveling over the cute cakes on display. Cecilia suggests having tea time there later, and Yoki agrees. They go to a flower shop next, where Cecilia marvels over the pretty roses. In his head, Yoki calls her the prettier one. Cecilia pets a stray cat-like creature next, which meows in delight. In her excitement, Cecilia meows back at it in return. Yoki finds this encounter cute, screaming dramatically. At a dress shop, Cecilia tries on a red dress and tentatively asks how she looks. Yoki gives it a thumbs up of approval. After a string of activities, Cecilia remarks that her fatigue from work has faded away. He spots an accessories store and invites Cecilia to check it out. Yuga sees Cecilia from afar and tries to call out to her. McKenna stops him because he might give himself away. Cecilia manages to catch her name and sees them, and Yuga happily approaches her, completely ignoring Yoki in the process. He tells Cecilia that they are also out and about on their day off and were hoping to have a fun time in town. He excitedly invites her to join them. Cecilia declines the invite since she was with Yoki, introducing him as a friend. Yuga stares at him, wondering if he has met Yoki before. A nervous Yoki says no, and Cecilia suspiciously hums in agreement. Yuga decides to include Yoki in the group and drags an unwilling Cecilia to the shop since he noticed she was eyeing it earlier. This saddens Yoki and pisses off McKenna, since it is the first time she has had a date with Yuga since Cecilia always has attention. She turns to Yoki, hoping he is getting along well with Cecilia on their own date. McKenna wishes him good luck, and possibly with Yoki around, Yuga will finally give up on Cecilia. Yoki initially thinks McKenna is a good person, but after being repeatedly called plain-faced, he changes his mind. Looking at the hero's party members, Yoki remembers that Cecilia turned down Yuga's marriage offer. Despite this, Yoki wonders if Yuga is still trying his chances with Cecilia. Yoki rejoins Cecilia, asking if she found anything she likes. Cecilia apologizes for leaving him behind. Since they are in an accessories store, Yoki decides to buy Cecilia a gift as a thank you for helping him and his friends. Overhearing this, Yuga intrudes by announcing he will get both Cecilia and McKenna a gift. Yoki looks at him strangely and wonders if Yuga is competing with him. Yoki sees a blue crystal necklace as a potential gift, which Cecilia finds pretty. Not wanting to lose, Yuga grabs the most expensive hair accessory. He forcibly removes Cecilia's disguise, revealing her identity to the other customers. When people recognize her and the other heroes, they crowd around the hero's party members. They are swept away to another location, except for Yoki. When Yoki recovers, he quickly looks for Cecilia. Yoki sees Raven being crowded by a bunch of girls. He looks familiar to Yoki, but he has trouble recognizing who he is. A man notices his confusion and explains that Raven used to be part of the hero's party. Seeing that he looks troubled, Yoki decides to divert the girl's attention by saying Yuga just passed by. He quickly takes Raven to a secluded alley, and Raven looks for something to give him. Yoki makes a move to leave, but Raven tells him to wait, revealing his childlike voice. Yoki finds out the reason for Raven's quiet nature and respects his secret, since Yoki has his own. Raven stops Yoki from leaving again, asking him to be his friend, since Yoki is one of the few people who does not laugh at him. Realizing Raven's honest effort, Yoki agrees, shaking his hand. He bids Raven a quick goodbye. At a loss, Yoki and Cecilia realize the other must have gone home. Cecilia hears a lost boy crying for his mom. Cecilia approaches him and heals his scraped knee. This does not stop the boy from crying. His ruckus draws the attention of Yoki, who decides to cheer the boy up by comically declaring it his new mission to find the boy's mother. This makes Cecilia smile, but she quickly scolds him. The kid bursts into laughter because he finds it funny that a grown man can be scolded. After calming down, the two begin searching for the boy's mother. Yoki advises Cecilia to go home in case her disguise ends up getting blown again, but Cecilia tells him not to worry, saying they'll figure it out when it happens. When Yoki isn't facing her, she lets out a sneeze. Meanwhile, Yuga drags McKenna on a search for Cecilia. McKenna asks him to stop since he might draw attention again and Cecilia may have gone home. Yuga gets mad and scolds McKenna since she makes it seem like she doesn't care about Cecilia. He runs off, unaware he left a sad McKenna behind. Yuga sees Cecilia and Yoki together, finally reuniting the kid with his mother. He smiles and looks behind for McKenna, only to see she is nowhere to be found. The next day, Yoki visits Cecilia only for Celia to inform him that Cecilia has fallen ill. As much as Yoki blames himself, Celia says that Yuga contributed to most of Cecilia's fatigue. He even tried to visit her, but Sophia had managed to fight him off. Yoki looks at Sophia uneasily, wondering how scary she really is. Seeing that Yoki is worried, Celia allows him to visit Cecilia. Sophia knocks on the door to inform Cecilia that Yoki is here to visit. He peeks a little before entering the door, charmed at the sight of Cecilia's room. His gaze spots her on the bed, and she apologizes for being sick. He sits beside her on a stool, and Yoki apologizes for ruining her day off, which Cecilia brushes off casually. Still, Yoki admits he made her visit many places. Cecilia relents, saying if it is Yoki's fault, he should go out with her again on her next day off. Seeing the promise of another date, Yoki dramatically accepts, and his outrageous speech makes them both laugh. Sophia barges in and gives Yoki a headlock after the laugh escalates into a cough. Sophia literally throws him out, and Happiness closes the manor doors after him, calling it useless to fight Sophia. As he walks away from the manor, he sees Raven, who is equally surprised to see him. Seeing this as a golden opportunity, Raven decides to ask for advice, admitting that he's actually interested in someone who likes his voice. Seeing how bashful he has gotten, Yoki can't help but compare Raven to a boy going through puberty. He tells Raven to have more confidence because he has a lot of good qualities and is even a hero. Raven smiles and agrees, deciding it's time to confess his feelings. It takes a moment for Yoki to realize that Raven is possibly here to confess to Cecilia. After realizing that Raven is a potential rival, Yoki panics. He begins imagining all the moments they can develop a romantic relationship. Before Yoki can even confirm his theory, a dispirited Raven returns. Yoki takes one look and thinks Raven must have been rejected. Yoki returns to Cecilia's home to check on her, but his concern only makes Sophia suspicious since they were just together. Yoki asks about Raven's visit and Sophia confirms that Raven did come by. She adds that Raven was asking to see Happiness, much to Yoki's surprise. Yoki catches Happiness sweeping the walkway outside the house. He asks if Raven came to see her, then quickly adds that Raven is his friend, earning a reaction from Happiness. Yoki asks if Raven confessed and what her reply was. Happiness answers bluntly that it's impossible. Yoki understands that the harsh response is what caused Raven to be so disheartened, but he's aware he cannot force Happiness to like him. Instead of answering, Happiness runs away from him. Back at the inn, Yoki gathers Seek and Duke to talk about Happiness and Raven, making Seek remember him as the human who kept losing to Yoki. Duke questions Yoki for letting a human get close to Happiness, but Yoki denies even trying to set them up. Duke insists that even if a human loves her, Happiness won't receive it well, because she's a harpy and humans hunted her race for their feathers. Duke saved her, and that's how she ended up joining the Demon Lord's army. Seek counters that Happiness might not completely hate humans if she chose to work at Cecilia's manor. Yoki understands Duke's concern, but he says Raven isn't a bad guy, though Duke still doesn't look convinced. The next day, Yoki visits the Adventurer Guild, but he can't find Clayman anywhere. One of the receptionists asks if he's looking for the Vice Guild Master. Yoki pauses and asks who that is, only to realize it's Clayman's official title. The news surprises him since Yoki always thought Clayman was a slacker, but Clayman actually holds an important position. When Yoki asks where Clayman is, the receptionist whispers that he is at the hospital, but that information needs to be kept a secret for the sake of the guild's dignity. Yoki drops by the hospital and finds Clayman covered in bandages. Clayman admits he made his wife angry. Their wedding anniversary was the other day, and he spent the whole day trying to pick a gift, but couldn't settle on anything, so he got kicked out of the shop and didn't even make it to dinner. His wife thought he forgot the anniversary completely. He received a beating from her which landed him in the hospital, and Yoki now understands why the guild wanted to keep it a secret. Yoki comments that Clayman's wife must be strong. Clayman says they both used to be A-rank adventurers, and they even worked as a team for high-level commissions. People gave them the nickname Invincible Couple of Apathy, but Yoki thinks the nickname is lame. Yoki offers to heal him, but Clayman refuses. He says he wants to stay injured so his wife can nurse him back to health. Then Sophia walks in and Yoki is surprised that she's there to visit Clayman. Clayman greets her enthusiastically, which earns him a kick from Sophia. Clayman comments that he can see under her skirt, and Sophia says she doesn't mind because she is his wife. Yoki looks at her in admiration for how confident she is in announcing that she is married to Clayman. Sophia bows to Yoki and thanks him for visiting. Yoki asks about Cecilia, and Sophia says Cecilia's fever has already gone down and she's doing much better. Sophia also shares that Cecilia is out on business. Yoki then asks Sophia if girls really care about presents. Sophia's aura turns grim and she asks if her husband said something. Yoki panics, avoids the question, and remembers the last time he wanted to give Cecilia a gift. He explains that he had thought about getting her something because he wants to make her happy. Sophia tells him that if the gift comes with genuine thoughts, Cecilia will be delighted. Yoki feels relieved and bids her farewell. As Yoki walks in town, his mood is good because he saw how loving a married couple can be. He starts imagining Cecilia as his wife. Yoki snaps back to reality, wondering why he pictured Cecilia in a modern setting from his past life. He heads to the Night Order's dorm to find Raven. When he finds his room, he finds Raven lying on the bed, rotting away. He tries to call for his attention, but Raven seems deaf to his calls. Raven immediately finds the energy to sit up when Yoki mentions Happiness' name. To fix Raven's confusion, Yoki shares that Happiness is his friend. He explains that part of the reason for his visit is because he wants to learn how they met. Raven explains that he met her during one of his patrols. He saw thugs cornering Happiness, so he decided to step in. The thugs threw insults and one tried to punch him, but Raven dodged. One of them recognized him, so they decided to flee. Raven was about to leave, but Happiness tugged on his cape. He spoke without thinking and belatedly let his voice out. He froze and covered his mouth, conscious of how he sounded. Happiness noticed right away. She told him his voice was nice. Embarrassed, Raven said his voice and his face didn't match, but Happiness insisted that she didn't care, and that she was jealous of what he had. She thanked him and left, but she stayed on his mind. Raven admits that Happiness' maid uniform looked familiar, which is why he ended up in the manor which Yoki indicates belongs to Cecilia's family. Raven asks how Yoki even knows Cecilia, so Yoki shares his story, though a made-up one to cover his demon identity. Raven is amazed that Yoki abandoned his homeland just to be with the person he loves. He praises Yoki, saying he's amazing for working hard as an adventurer to become a man worthy of her. Raven, however, admits he feels like he isn't getting anywhere with Happiness. Yoki tries to comfort him and says Happiness isn't good with men, and she has past trauma. Raven starts to believe his confession scared her. Yoki says that's not necessarily true, and that he shouldn't give up on her too early. He invites Raven to go out, and they end up visiting an accessory shop. Raven looks tense and says they feel out of place, but Yoki insists that it's fine. Yoki spots the necklace he wanted to give Cecilia before and buys it immediately. Then he notices Raven quietly looking for something for Happiness. They find an accessory with pink feathers, and Yoki says it would look good on her and that Raven should buy it. Raven hesitates and asks if a gift from a stranger would scare her. Yoki tells Raven that anyone would like a present as long as it is sincere, and adds that the design is something Happiness might like. Thinking about Happiness, Raven makes up his mind that if he gets the chance to see Happiness again, he'll give it to her. He writes on paper instead of speaking, so the cashier won't hear his voice when he buys the accessory. McKenna spots them and immediately recognizes Yoki. She approaches them and makes fun of their presence in an accessory shop meant for girls. Yoki gets defensive before proudly declaring they are there to buy presents for the ones they love, which earns him a hush motion from Raven. McKenna grins mischievously as she tries to coax Raven into admitting who he likes, but Raven only avoids eye contact with her. McKenna quickly understands why he isn't speaking to her is because she had made fun of him when they first met. The remorse on her face makes Yoki surprised that she acknowledges her mistakes. Soon, people in the shop start recognizing McKenna and Raven. McKenna suggests they move somewhere else so they can talk more. At a restaurant, McKenna complains that they're not even talking since they keep eating to evade her. To get Yoki to start talking, she casually mentions Cecilia. At the mere mention of her name, Yoki immediately begins sharing his status with her. He admits that they technically are not dating since Cecilia is always busy and has to deal with several proposals. He shares that he is aware Yuga had recently gotten rejected by her. McKenna explains that it's only natural for Cecilia to reject Yuga because all Yuga does is anger her. McKenna starts listing several instances where Yuga had annoyed them. She also points out that because Yuga is popular, he often causes trouble for the party. McKenna recalls a past journey where Yuga insisted on staying the night for his fangirls and Cecilia shut the suggestion down. McKenna warns Yoki that Cecilia doesn't tolerate men who treat women carelessly, and it's dangerous to piss her off. McKenna turns the conversation to Raven, but Yoki cuts in and says he'll protect Raven's pure love. McKenna snaps that she shouldn't be treated like a villain since she wants to help Raven too. McKenna says she understands when people want to talk about love. Raven wonders if she has a relationship issue. McKenna denies it at first, but Raven points out that Yoki is dependable when it comes to these things. After a pause, McKenna finally admits what's been weighing on her. She thinks Yuga must hate her now because of something that happened. Yoki braces himself since the topic seems heavy. McKenna explains that it started during their repeated defeats at the Demon Lord's castle. Yoki already knows, but he forces himself to act clueless. She says they weren't losing to the Demon Lord, but to the demon guarding the middle section. Every time they lost, the party got dragged back to the nearest human village and were even healed. But they kept lying to the villagers, claiming they withdrew from the middle section so they could prepare themselves for their standoff with the Demon Lord. They didn't want the villagers to know they lost to a guard because it would be humiliating for the party and Yuga. They kept getting defeated for a month and the village provisions started running low. When things got desperate, the demon offered the condition to leave Cecilia behind. McKenna was the one who persuaded the party to accept it. She believes that's why Yuga hates her for it. Raven, using his voice, tells Yoki not to blame McKenna because he did not refuse the offer. Yoki asks if McKenna ever told Cecilia how she felt. McKenna shakes her head, believing asking for forgiveness feels too cheeky. Yoki persuades her to do it, and McKenna eventually agrees because the party really matters to her. They watch McKenna leave, and Raven expresses he doesn't want to end things here. He gathers the courage and announces he will go see Happiness again. They end up visiting Cecilia's manor, and Duke spots them and greets Yoki. He doesn't recognize Raven, so Yoki introduces him. Duke finds out that Raven is the one who confessed to Cecilia. Not liking his presence or how he refuses to talk, Duke doesn't take too kindly to him, refusing to hand over Happiness. Yoki tries to explain that Duke is only protected because he knew Happiness for a long time. Despite Yoki's attempt to calm him down, Duke continues to demand that Raven leave Happiness alone. Raven finally talks and admits that he doesn't know much about happiness. Duke is baffled by his answer, because a man would usually declare that he will protect the ones he loves. However, Raven shakes his head and says it isn't like him to say such things. The answer surprises Duke, and they soon see happiness at the side. Instead of acting harshly, Duke pushes Raven forward and tells him he should say what he wants to her. When Yoki gives him an unsure look, Duke admits he was only testing Raven, and it should be happiness who chooses who she wants to be with. Raven approaches her and apologizes for confessing so suddenly. He then shyly holds up his present and nervously asks her to be his friend. Happiness takes the bag and says that she wouldn't mind being friends with him. Seek tries to snap Yoki out of this slump, insisting that they go to Cecilia's house because he is bored. However, since Cecilia isn't there, Yoki refuses to leave his bed. As he continues to rot away, Yoki realizes that it's already been a week since he last saw her. Apparently, everyone from the hero's party has been busy. Cecilia was assigned to travel to various villages to heal wounded individuals. Raven and McKenna are occupied as well, as they now serve as the heads of their respective organizations. Meanwhile, Yuga is acting as a diplomat while also being tasked with defeating high-level demons around the kingdom. He admits to himself that he feels guilty that the party has become so busy that they needed to split up, and also notes how their relationship has strained. He knows part of the reason is because he allowed them to defeat the demon lord, so he wishes there was something he could do to repay them. Seek eventually grows impatient and jumps onto Yoki's torso. He complains and says he wishes Duke had stayed instead of agreeing to become a knight. Suddenly, Happiness enters the room and informs them that Cecilia will be returning in the afternoon. This instantly lifts Yoki's spirits. It means he'll finally have the chance to give her the necklace he bought. Before heading to the manor, Yoki decides to kill some time in town. A mysterious fortune teller stops him and warns that he'll have an unlucky day. Yoki refuses to believe her and continues on his way. To him, being able to see Cecilia again is more than enough to make the day worthwhile. When he enters his usual bakery, he's greeted by a muscular man wearing a frilly apron. Yoki wonders what happened to the shop's usual assistant, only for the man to reveal that he's actually her brother. Yoki orders some cupcakes, but they're enthusiastically shoved into his arms. He leaves the bakery a little shaken and slightly disappointed to find that the cupcakes ended up crushed. He takes a bite anyway and is relieved to find that they still taste just as delicious as ever. However, his luck takes another turn when he accidentally bumps into another tall, muscular man on the street, earning him an angry glare. Thankfully, he comes out of the encounter unscathed. Moments later, he nearly steps on some dog droppings, making him start to think that maybe today really is unlucky. Suddenly, a child bumps into him. Yoki manages to catch the child, but the skewer of the kid was holding slips from his hand and falls to the ground. The child begins to cry over the lost food, so Yoki buys him 2 skewers to make up for it. After the child leaves happily, Yoki realizes he's fallen victim to a pickpocket. Using his magic to strengthen his legs, Yoki begins his chase. This allows him to easily catch up to the pickpocket, whom he knocks out with a powerful kick. He retrieves his bag of coins, but suddenly Yuga appears and points his sword at Yoki, accusing him of being the thief. Yoki tries to explain the situation, but Yuga refuses to listen and repeatedly swings his sword at him. But his bag gets sliced open. He attempts to remove himself from the situation, only to be blocked by several knights. Yuga cuts off his other escape route, and Yoki begins to believe that today truly is the worst day of his life as a human. He later finds himself handcuffed in a dungeon, feeling depressed over everything that has happened. Duke eventually shows up and teases him, joking that Yoki must be craving a solitary life again since Cecilia has been ignoring him. Yoki tries to argue back, but Duke simply smiles in understanding. He reassures Yoki that Raven is already working to clear his name. Yoki feels relieved, but he notices that Duke doesn't refer to Raven as his superior. Duke casually responds that the only person he considers his superior is Yoki. However, he adds that he does call Raven Commander when they're out in public. Their conversation is interrupted by Irini, who arrives to remind Duke that he has training to attend. Yoki realizes that Irini is an elf, while Duke asks her for the dungeon key, explaining that Raven has already proven Yoki's innocence. Irini happily hands over the key, confirming that Yoki has been cleared of all charges. She then turns her attention to him and mentions that Yuga would like to personally apologize for the misunderstanding. Yoki later meets Yuga and Raven at a restaurant where a generous spread of food is laid out before them. Yuga enthusiastically welcomes him and urges him to eat, his overwhelming brightness nearly blinding Yoki. They quickly clean their plates, and Yoki thanks Yuga for the meal. Yuga then shares that Raven thoroughly scolded him for his mistake. He recalls seeing Yoki around town with Cecilia before and asks about Yoki's true relationship with her. Yoki nervously answers that they're just friends. Yuga feels relieved and then asks Yoki if it would be possible for him to give some advice on how to get closer to Cecilia. Yoki's eye twitches as Yuga is essentially his rival when it comes to earning Cecilia's affection. Still, he decides to tell Yuga to seek advice from someone who has known Cecilia longer, since he himself only became friends with her recently. Raven writes that he can't do that, which causes Yuga to insist that Raven should speak freely and not worry about his voice. Yoki realizes just how insensitive Yuga can be toward his party members. Raven, still refusing to talk, suggests that Yuga try speaking with Mikana instead. Yuga immediately refuses, claiming that Mikana hates Cecilia. Surprised, Yoki asks if Mikana ever said that herself. Yuga reveals that Mikana had once abandoned Cecilia during a battle. Yoki and Raven quickly realize that Yuga is referring to the fight against Yoki's demon self. Yoki's expression hardens as he tells Yuga that it wasn't Mikana's fault, nor was she in the wrong at that moment. Yoki explains that it was the demon who proposed the deal and that Mikana knew they needed to proceed with defeating the Demon King before they ran out of provisions. Even so, Yuga refuses to accept that Mikana wasn't at fault. To him, if Mikana truly didn't hate Cecilia, then she never should have even considered the offer. No matter what Yoki says, Yuga continues to insist that Mikana is to blame. Because of this, Yoki decides to shift the blame onto Yuga instead. He tells him that the person who made the final decision to leave Cecilia behind was actually Yuga himself. Raven's eyes widen at this revelation, as it isn't common knowledge and Mikana never told Yoki about it. However, Yuga is far too deep in denial to notice Yoki's deliberate wording. He repeatedly insists that he wasn't the one who sentenced Cecilia to death, and that everything was Mikana's fault. Raven places a firm hand on Yuga's shoulder and gently motions for him to stop talking. Yuga finally begins to calm down, and Yoki tells him that he needs to properly face his mistakes. This causes Yuga to suddenly break down in tears, drawing the attention of the other restaurant guests. Yoki apologizes for being too harsh and tries to calm him down. After some time, Yuga regains his composure and reveals that he and Mikana have been friends since they were children. Among everyone in the party, Mikana is the one who has stayed by his side the longest. Realizing how terribly he has treated her, Yuga wonders what he can do to make things right. Yoki casually tells Yuga to let Mikana scold him like she usually does. He explains that when someone scolds you, it simply means they care about you. Encouraged by Yoki's words, Yuga decides to apologize to Mikana. However, he asks Yoki to come with him, admitting that he's actually scared. Yuga practically drags Yoki along to Mikana's house. Yoki and Raven are forced to wait outside, as Yuga honestly admits that he lacks the courage to go in alone if they aren't nearby. Inside the house, Yuga accidentally walks in on Mikana while she's changing, causing her to scream. Her voice can be heard outside, making Yoki and Raven worry slightly. Unbothered, Yuga grabs Mikana by the shoulders and begins his apology. At first, Mikana just wants him out of the room, but her feelings slowly begin to change as Yuga sincerely pours out how sorry he is. However, when he ends his apology by asking her to continue scolding him in the future, Mikana becomes irritated. She assumes this is some strange quirk of his that makes him want to be scolded, so she decides to teach him a lesson using her magic. Yoki quietly slips away, leaving Raven behind to handle the aftermath. Yoki rushes back into town and heads towards Cecilia's house. He passes the fortune teller again, but doesn't stop to listen. The fortune teller was just about to tell him that his luck had changed. Along the way, Yoki receives a bag of cupcakes from the bakery as an apology for the ones that were crushed earlier. Then he's surrounded by servants who apologize for the trouble their master caused him. The young boy's attendant also hands him a bag of skewers to make up for what happened. At last, Yoki arrives at Cecilia's manor and is brought to her room. It feels like months since he last saw her, and he happily shows her all the food he picked up along the way. Cecilia invites him to eat with her and says she'll prepare the tea. Yoki is surprised as it's usually a servant's job, but Cecilia explains that she's been learning how to cook from Sophia. After they finish their meal, they suddenly hear Yuga's voice as he bursts into the room and immediately asks Cecilia to scold him. Mikana punches him out of the way and tells Cecilia that they actually came for a different reason. Standing beside them is Raven, and Mikana begins to apologize. Sensing that this is a matter for the hero's party, Yoki gives them some space to talk. The hero's party begins apologizing for the time they left Cecilia in the hands of the middle gatekeeper. Although Cecilia insists that she doesn't hold it against them, Mikana still believes they need to apologize as they had effectively abandoned her comrades. Cecilia, on the other hand, reasons that all of them risked their lives that day and that she also left them to face the Demon King without a healer in the party. Mikana suddenly recalls that day. After Yuga dealt the finishing blow, worry immediately overcame her. She was the first to sprint back to the middle floor, praying that Cecilia was still alive. To her surprise, she found Cecilia completely unharmed and running toward her as well. Relieved that Cecilia was safe, Mikana collapsed into her arms, having sustained heavy damage and exhausted all of her magic. Cecilia fondly remembers that Mikana was the first to reach her despite being badly injured. She is also grateful to the rest of the party, as they all kept their promise and rushed back for her. She tells them that, above all else, she is simply thankful that they all survived the ordeal. Eventually, the heroes' party's friendship is restored, and they begin smiling among themselves once more. Watching them, Yoki smiles as well, feeling that their bond has only grown stronger. After most of the heroes' party leaves, Yoki and Cecilia take a walk around the property. Cecilia quickly guesses that her party's sudden apologies had something to do with Yoki. Nervous, Yoki admits that he wanted to do something for them, since he was the one who caused the rift in the first place. Cecilia smiles and tells him that she's happy he's getting along so well with her family and friends. Seeing this as the perfect opportunity, Yoki decides to give her his present. When Cecilia opens the box, she finds a familiar pendant inside. Yoki explains that he went back to retrieve it and hopes that Cecilia will accept it as a gift from him. When she does, Yoki suddenly breaks into tears and loudly expresses his gratitude for her accepting it. Cecilia can't help but think fondly of him, as her life has become happier since he decided to live among them. Elsewhere, a village is being raided by bandits. Just as the bandits are about to strike down the remaining villagers, a mysterious swordsman appears and effortlessly defeats them all. One day, Seek and Yoki ride in a carriage with Cecilia to assist her. Yoki grumbles about why he had to bring Seek along since he had been hoping to spend the day alone with Cecilia. Cecilia begins to apologize for dragging them along, but the movement of the carriage makes her feel sick. Seek quickly offers her a potion made by him, and after a few sips, she instantly feels better. Seek makes sure to rub it in Yoki's face that he's the more helpful one. Smiling at their bickering, Cecilia shares how grateful she is to have them with her. Both boys express how eagerly they want to help her with her job. They finally arrive at a destroyed village, where the village head is the first to greet them. While he recognizes Cecilia, he is uncertain about Seek and Yoki's presence, but relaxes once Cecilia explains that they are also healers. They are brought to the chapel where several villagers have taken refuge. Immediately, the trio begins treating the sick and injured. As Cecilia works, Yoki can't help but keep his eyes on her, admiring how kind and diligent she is. The village head notices and approaches him, commenting on how wonderful Cecilia is. He then realizes that no one was seriously harmed during the attack. The village head explains that a mysterious swordsman named Miller appeared and forced all the bandits to flee. Yoki's attention returns to Cecilia, who is clearly exhausted from healing so many people. He urges her to rest, but when she refuses, Yoki decides to cast a spell to make her sleep. The villagers are shocked when she suddenly collapses, but Yoki reassures them that she is merely asleep and that he needs somewhere to set her down. Moments later, Cecilia wakes up in bed and immediately pouts at Yoki. She then puts on a threatening expression, ready to scold him about consent. While Yoki apologizes for putting her to sleep, he insists he only did so because she was about to collapse from overexertion. Her expression softens, knowing that he is telling the truth, but she still makes him promise never to do it again. Yoki agrees, then informs her that he and Seek have already finished treating the remaining villagers. This brings a beautiful smile to her face, and Yoki can't help but fall in love with her all over again. The village head then enters the room and asks Cecilia if they can visit a girl named Teal who lives far from the village. He explains that Teal wasn't attacked, but she is weak and bedridden, so he is deeply worried about her. They immediately head to Teal's home and introduce themselves when they enter. Teal can barely speak as she begins coughing violently, so Seek quickly hands her some medicine. Teal looks at the potion uneasily, but Yoki reassures her that Seek is very skilled with medicine. She decides to drink it and is surprised by the immediate effects. She thanks them, then expresses her gratitude to the guardian angel, which she explains is the deity represented by the statue outside the village. Seek and Yoki are a bit skeptical, but Teal insists that the deity is a true miracle. She explains that she prayed to it and was left unharmed during the bandit raid. She also claims that the guardian angel once rescued her from a pack of wolves when she was 7 years old. As Cecilia and Yoki listen to her describe the deity's powers, they begin to suspect that something about it involves dark magic. However, Teal takes this as an insult toward her protector. To prove her point, she brings them to see the statue herself. The group stares at the statue with unease, as it is clearly a demon statue rather than that of an angel. Teal is about to defend it when another coughing fit overtakes her, forcing Cecilia to hurry her back home. Seek and Yoki stay behind, already recognizing the statue as Guy, a gargoyle from the Demon King's castle. Suddenly, Guy comes to life and launches an attack at Yoki. Seek swiftly subdues Guy and pins him to the ground. Seek is ready to strike again, but Yoki stops him, saying he wants to speak with Guy first. Guy is confused as to why Yoki didn't finish him off. Yoki apologizes for disturbing him and asks why he became the village's deity. Guy explains that he was originally created to guard a temple but was stolen by bandits. He happened to be on their wagon when they decided to attack the village. Seeing an opportunity to punish the bandits, he used his magic to drive them away, after which the villagers began worshipping him as their deity. Over time, however, the villagers gradually stopped believing in him, and only Teal continued to pray to him. When the bandits attacked again the previous day, Guy chose to hide and protect her. Realizing that Guy has no desire to harm humans, Yoki decides to leave him be. Before doing so, however, he quietly whispers something to Seek. By evening, only Cecilia and Yoki remain walking around as Seek has already decided to go home. In truth, Yoki had asked him to leave earlier. Cecilia notices that Yoki has gone quiet and asks if something is wrong. Yoki tells her that he feels it might be fine to leave Guy in the village. He explains that Guy has been behaving and hasn't shown any intention of harming the village. Cecilia suggests that they observe him a little longer before making a final decision. They continue their walk and fall back into silence. Yoki feels nervous beside her, realizing he has run out of things to talk about. Suddenly, Cecilia trips over a tree root, but Yoki quickly steadies her. It takes a moment for them to realize how close they are, but once they do, they immediately pull away from each other in embarrassment, and Yoki shyly tells her to be careful since it's dangerous at night. After recovering from the awkward moment, they continue their walk. Later, a villager rings the alarm bell, shouting that the bandits have returned. Before they can breach the gates, Yoki and the others are already there to greet them, though Seek is still half asleep. Yoki lets Seek handle the first few attacks, which surprises Cecilia, since Seek is far stronger than she expected. After a while, Yoki decides to join the fight, and Cecilia promises to support him. Yoki easily blasts the enemies away, even protecting Cecilia before any attack can reach her. Suddenly, they notice smoke rising from the direction where Guy is located. Yoki tells Seek to head there immediately. More bandits appear, but Yoki swiftly defeats them. Once they are all rounded up, the villagers celebrate, relieved that they are safe again. However, Yoki and Cecilia realize that Seek has not returned. They rush toward Guy's location and find Teal crying beside him while Seek is being lifted into the air by Miller. Upon seeing them, Miller kicks Seek aside and recognizes Cecilia. At the same time, Cecilia recognizes Miller as the hero of the Gallus Empire. Seek explains what happened before they arrived, explaining that Miller attacked Guy from behind while Guy was protecting Teal. Seek tried to help but was quickly overpowered. Miller then turns his attention back to Guy and Teal, calling Teal pathetic for defending a demon. Yoki tries to convince him to stop, but Miller declares that he will destroy both Teal and Guy. To stop him, Yoki attempts to launch a magic attack, but it fizzles out before it can even reach Miller. Cecilia shouts at Yoki to retreat, warning him that Miller's weapon is a special artificial demon-slaying sword capable of absorbing magic. Miller swings his blade and slices off Guy's arm and wing, nearly harming Teal in the process. Cecilia begs him to stop, arguing that if he injures a villager, it could spark a war between their kingdoms. Miller's expression suddenly turns maniacal, as the very idea of war excites him. He licks his sword, and Cecilia realizes that he cannot be reasoned with. He begins talking about how boring peaceful times have been, prompting Cecilia to declare that he has no pride as a hero. Determined to stop him, Yoki casts a small wind spell toward Miller, but it is effortlessly absorbed by his sword. He then promises to unleash something stronger and summons a small tornado, hurling it at Miller, yet it is absorbed once again. Miller mocks Yoki, calling him an idiot for relying only on magic that clearly won't work against his weapon. He advances while Yoki launches a barrage of spells at him. Guy and the others grow worried, fearing that Yoki might run out of magic. Yoki attempts more advanced magic, but it still appears to have no effect on Miller. He fires another long stream of magic, and Miller confidently raises his sword to absorb it, continuing to insult Yoki for being stubborn and only using magic. At the same time, Yoki begins to smirk, knowing that his plan is finally taking shape. Moments later, cracks start forming along Miller's sword. Yoki explains that the blade is artificial, meaning it can only contain a limited amount of magical energy before overloading. He pushes even more magic into it, and Miller is visibly stunned by the sheer amount of mana Yoki possesses. When the sword finally shatters, Yoki dashes forward, charging his fist with wind magic and punching Miller with full force, sending him crashing into a tree. Yoki taunts Miller for being too arrogant, but Miller merely flashes a sinister grin and fires a holy arrow at him, but the attack hurtles toward Guy instead. Teal throws herself in front of him, using her body as a shield. As she collapses, she smiles, glad that she was able to protect Guy. Miller laughs at the sight, clearly entertained. Yoki's anger flares as he vows to make Miller pay, but Miller distracts him by firing a magical arrow toward his group. Without hesitation, Yoki casts a barrier to protect everyone. Once the danger passes, they realize that Miller has escaped. Yoki feels his anger surge again, this time overwhelming him completely. He begins transforming back into his demon form, with his body contorting as his wings and horn grow from his body. However, Cecilia notices that he is far larger than before and doesn't seem like himself. Yoki glances at Cecilia for a moment before taking off into the air to hunt down Miller. Miller is fleeing while using magical items to heal himself. He spots Yoki in the sky but doesn't recognize him due to his altered demon appearance. Miller pulls out another demon-slaying sword, but Yoki is already right behind him. Yoki slams Miller to the ground with one hand and declares that Miller is responsible for cutting off Guy's arm and wing. Miller assumes that Yoki is a demon who owns Guy, but before he can say much, Yoki kicks him violently across the forest. Miller survives the blow, but Yoki instantly appears behind him again, punches him in the stomach, and lifts him into the air, intent on ending him. Miller mocks him, accusing him of enjoying tormenting others. Yoki's eyes widen as he remembers the way Cecilia looked at him earlier. Regaining his senses, he tells Miller that he isn't worth his time and drops him into the lake below. Meanwhile, the rest of the group returns to Teal's house. Cecilia waits outside for Yoki, worried that he won't return. He approaches her, already back in his human form, much to her relief. Cecilia notices blood forming on his forehead from where he tore out his horn. Yoki tries to brush it off, but Cecilia's eyes fill with tears at the sight. She gently heals him, then smiles and welcomes him back. Yoki blushes and answers that he is home. Later in the day, Teal tells them that she wants to go to Minerva so she can help Guy. Regular healing magic won't work, but she believes that there may be a way to heal his wounds in Minerva. Since demons aren't allowed in Minerva, Yoki uses earth magic to disguise Guy as a clay statue. They eventually return home. Teal is easily hired by Cilia, but when Yoki tries to leave Guy with her, she immediately refuses, not wanting an ugly statue in her home. Teal ends up crying because she is forced to be separated from Guy. One day, Teal is busy cleaning Guy in Yoki's room. When she asks where Yoki is, Guy mentions that he has already left to head to the castle. At the castle, Cecilia and Yoki meet King Daz to discuss the events that took place in Daka's village. Yoki initially thinks the king is full of himself, but Daz suddenly shifts to a relaxed tone and insists that they speak casually. However, his advisor, Sylvia, immediately scolds him for his improper conduct. As the king playfully argues with her, Yoki wonders if this is his true personality. Daz then acknowledges their accomplishments in defeating Miller and saving the village. It offers them a reward, but Cecilia politely declines. Daz then turns to Yoki and asks what he wants. With his usual dramatic flair, Yoki declares that what he desires is not something the king can give him. Daz is taken aback as he is not used to anyone saying he has nothing to offer. He tries to guess Yoki's wish, even asking if Yoki wants his throne. Yoki denies every suggestion until he finally blurts out that what he wants is Cecilia's love. The room falls into an awkward silence and Daz stares at him in bewilderment before bursting into good-hearted laughter. He admits that this truly is something he cannot grant. Yoki immediately becomes flustered, realizing he actually said it out loud. Moments later, they return to Cecilia's manor, where Yoki desperately begs for her forgiveness. Cecilia scolds him for confessing in such a public and inappropriate setting. Celia finds the situation amusing and declares that Yoki must reflect on his actions, banning him from seeing Cecilia for an entire month. Yoki collapses in despair while Cecilia tries to convince Celia that the punishment is too harsh. Seeing through her daughter's hesitation, Celia realizes that Cecilia doesn't actually want Yoki gone for that long. She reduces the punishment to 2 weeks and orders Happiness to drag him out. Happiness drags him down the hallway, where they spot Seek sitting sadly in the garden. Yoki realizes that Seek must still feel guilty about his defeat against Miller and his inability to protect Teal and Guy. Sensing that Yoki is stalling, Happiness drags him the rest of the way. They return to his room, where Happiness drops him onto the floor beside his bed. Yoki greets Teal and Guy as he lands. Teal is surprised as it is the first time she has heard Guy's name, though she still wants to continue calling him her guardian angel. When she begins coughing again, Happiness urges her to go home. Guy bids her farewell, clearly worried about her health. Before leaving, Teal tells Guy that he is her source of strength. Afterward, Yoki collapses onto his bed to mope. He tells Guy that he is no longer allowed to see Cecilia for some time. Guy suggests that he should use this opportunity to make it up to her, since he now has the time. Yoki drags himself to the guild and demands that Clayman give him as much work as possible so he can become a man worthy of standing beside Cecilia. Half a month passes and Cecilia accidentally pours tea for two, a mistake that Celia immediately notices. To hide her eagerness to see Yoki again, Cecilia claims that the second cup was actually meant for Celia. Sophia then shares that Clayman told her Yoki has been keeping himself extremely busy with guild work. The mere thought of Yoki makes Cecilia blush and smile. That evening, when Yoki returns to his room, Guy notices that he seems to be in good spirits. Yoki happily shares that he will be able to see Cecilia again soon. Guy then decides that it's time to tell Yoki something he has been keeping to himself. He transforms back into his original form. Yoki's eyes widen when he sees that cracks have begun forming and pieces are starting to crumble away. Guy admits that he won't last much longer. Guy asks Yoki to look after Teal, deeply worried because she is also very sick. He explains that Teal relies on him heavily, and if he were to disappear, she might believe she is completely alone. Yoki promises to take care of Teal, but he also firmly declares that he will save Guy as well. He tells Guy that the room would feel lonely without him and says it would be great if Guy could remain there as a permanent fixture. Yoki leaves and meets up with Duke, who tells him that Guy might simply need to be fed a magical ore. Yoki is surprised to learn that this is common knowledge and decides to search for one immediately. When he reaches the exit, he suddenly realizes he has no idea where to find magical ore. Before he can figure out his next move, Cecilia comes running toward him with bad news. Apparently, Teal's condition has worsened. Sheet and Yoki rush to Teal's room, where Seek is busy mixing herbs for her. Seek explains that Teal has been fighting a fever that refuses to subside and her energy is rapidly draining. Cecilia sits by Teal's side, feeling helpless since magic cannot cure illness. Seek adds that they don't have enough herbs to sustain her, but obtaining dusk grass could greatly help her recovery. He explains that dusk grass does not grow anywhere near Minerva, so Yoki and Cecilia volunteer to search for it. Yoki expresses his gratitude towards Cecilia and mentions that he also needs to help Guy. Upon hearing Guy's name, Teal tries to get up in a panic, but Seek gently convinces her to lie back down. Seek tells Yoki that he will stay behind and protect Teal while they are gone. As they leave the room, Yoki asks Cecilia if she knows where they might find magical ore. Cecilia suggests that a merchant might have some, so they decide to head there, but they immediately run into Celia. Yoki and Cecilia hurriedly try to explain themselves, remembering that Yoki is still banned from seeing her. However, Celia tells them it's fine, and since they are doing this for Teal's sake. They visit the wealthy merchant, but when they ask about magical ore and dusk grass, he reveals that both are currently out of stock. Frustrated, Yoki groans just as Clayman enters the shop to pick up a request. When he sees Yoki, he tries to persuade him to take it, but Yoki refuses. Clayman reveals that he already knows about Yoki's situation. He explains that the request involves defeating a monster inside a mine where magical ore and dusk grass can be found and harvested. Realizing this is exactly what they need, Yoki and Cecilia accept the request. They depart with Clayman and Sophia using special transport, since the journey will take 2 days and they are already pressed for time. Sophia decides to tag along, feeling personally responsible for Teal's condition. Before heading to the mine, the group stops by a nearby town to rest and prepare for the battle ahead. Yoki is confused as to why they aren't going straight to the mine, so Clayman explains that the mana output in the area grows stronger in the evening, which also strengthens the monster they will be facing. The target is a rock eater, a creature that has been growing unusually powerful from consuming magical ores. Normally, rock eaters are not dangerous, but this one has mutated, becoming violent and resistant to magical attacks. On top of that, the client has requested that the rock eater's skin be retrieved without a single scratch, which is why Clayman has joined them. His strategy is to restrain the creature with magic rather than attack it directly. The next morning, the group prepares to set out, but Yoki and Cecilia are surprised to see that Sophia is still wearing her maid uniform. When asked why, Sophia explains that it is a special outfit and that Clayman likes seeing her in it, which only leaves Yoki and Cecilia confused. When they arrive at the cave, they venture inside and soon spot the rock eater feeding on magical ore. The moment it senses their presence, it begins hurling rocks at them. The group scrambles to dodge while Clayman uses his paper shikigami to break some of the projectiles into smaller pieces. Yoki attempts to attack, but his magic simply bounces off the creature. Clayman immediately scolds him, reminding him that they must not damage the skin. As the rock eater advances, Yoki and Cecilia cast restraining spells, but the creature easily breaks free. It slams its fist into the ground, forcing them to scatter. With their initial plan failing, they look to Clayman for the next move. He reveals a new plan that involves him protecting Sophia with his paper shikigami while she attacks the rock eater from the inside. Cecilia voices concern about how dangerous this is, but both Sophia and Clayman insist they are confident in their abilities. Trusting them, Yoki casts another restraining spell and Cecilia follows suit. In its fury, the rock eater opens its mouth, giving Clayman the chance to perform his spell and sends Sophia straight inside the creature to defeat it. With Sophia inside, the rock eater suddenly sheds portions of its skin, forming smaller versions of itself that immediately swarm toward the group. Yoki and Cecilia struggle to maintain their restraining spells as the miniature rock creatures close in. Realizing that binding alone won't be enough, Yoki shifts tactics and begins attacking the smaller monsters directly, only to find that his magic has no effect on them. He instead reinforces his fists with magic and starts fighting them physically. A few of the creatures manage to slip past him and rush toward Clayman. Clayman allows himself to take a blow, refusing to defend or evade because he must maintain absolute concentration to keep Sophia safe inside the rock eater. Seeing this, Yoki grows furious that Clayman is leaving himself completely exposed. Meanwhile, the rock eater finally breaks free from Yoki and Cecilia's spells. It raises its massive arm to strike Cecilia but freezes mid-attack. Clayman smirks, and moments later, the Rock Eater collapses to the ground. Sophia emerges from within it, still wrapped protectively in Clayman's paper shikigami. Clayman immediately rushes to her side and pulls her into a tight hug to make sure she's unharmed. Yoki and Cecilia both blush at the open display of affection, but Sophia quickly pushes Clayman away, reminding everyone that they still need to find dusk grass. Snapping back to their mission, Yoki and Cecilia dash deeper into the cave. After searching for a while, they finally discover the dusk grass they need for Teal. Once they exit the mine, Yoki insists on heading to Minerva immediately, but Clayman firmly refuses, stating that they will make their journey during daylight. That night, while Clayman sleeps, Yoki quietly slips out of their room. In the hallway, he finds Cecilia waiting for him with a small bag in hand, filled with dusk grass. She has already figured out that he plans to fly back alone so Teal and Guy can receive help as soon as possible. Surprised, Yoki admits she's right and Cecilia simply smiles, saying she trusts him with the medicine. Yoki takes the bag, transforms into his demon form, and soars into the night sky toward Minerva. When he reaches his room, he finds Guy completely motionless. Panic grips him as he fears he may be too late. He shakes Guy desperately, yelling that he must wake up or he'll break Teal's heart. At the mention of Teal, Guy suddenly wakes and asks how she is doing. Yoki reassures him that she is stable since he has already delivered the herbs and Seek is watching over her. Relieved, Guy admits he initially doesn't want to take the magical ore, believing it won't save him. Furious, Yoki begins shoving the ore into his mouth, insisting he must try for Teal's sake. Remembering how much Teal depends on him, Guy finally accepts and consumes the magical ore. In an instant, his cracked stone body restores itself completely. Overwhelmed with emotion, Guy immediately takes off toward Teal's home. Teal is asleep when he arrives but stirs when she senses him beside her bed. Seeing her improved condition, Guy feels a deep sense of relief. By the window, Yoki and Seek watch their reunion. Guy thanks Seek sincerely for protecting both Teal and him, even during the battle against Miller. Seek tears up and Yoki congratulates him on a job well done. Teal notices that Guy's arm is fully healed and he confirms that they no longer need to worry. That same evening, Yoki returns to the inn in time to ride back with Cecilia the next day. Exhausted, he falls asleep with his head resting in her lap. Cecilia smiles softly and murmurs that this is his reward. One rainy evening, three hooded figures stand overlooking a quiet town. One of them clutches an ominous book filled with dark arts. The next morning, Yoki wanders through town, bored out of his mind. As he walks aimlessly, he spots Clayman and approaches him. Clayman explains that he's out searching for an anniversary present. Yoki eagerly offers to help and drags him into a prop store. He immediately grabs a pair of cat ears and declares they would be perfect for Sophia, especially since they would match the maid outfit Clayman loves so much. Clayman quickly corrects him, insisting he only likes plain maid outfits. He admits that he has already bought something he intends to give Sophia, but Yoki barely listens. His attention shifts to a long black coat and a full-face bat mask displayed nearby. He calls the outfit cool-looking, then eagerly tries it on after the saleslady encourages him. Clayman stares at him with a flat, unimpressed expression, but Yoki proudly declares that this is his ideal aesthetic. Fueled by excitement from his new outfit, Yoki demands that Clayman give him a task. Clayman returns to the guild hall alongside him, much to the surprise of the receptionist, Sierra, who knows he was supposed to be taking the day off. When Sierra notices Yoki trailing behind in his dramatic attire, she mistakenly assumes he is a new shikigami Clayman created. Clayman corrects her, saying Yoki is simply an old friend, though he doesn't tell her it's Yoki. Clayman instructs Sierra to hand over all the troublesome requests, which are 4 A-ranked quests. Without hesitation, Yoki declares that he'll take all of them. When Sierra asks for his name for registration, Yoki dramatically announces that he is known as the Black Thunder Swordsman. Both Clayman and Sierra give him unreadable looks, but Clayman tells her to register the name anyway. Later, during one of the quests, Yoki channels his lightning magic through his new sword as he clashes against a black dragon. After defeating the black dragon, Yoki harvests its heart and delivers it to the client. The guild members are stunned by how effortlessly he handled such a dangerous creature, leaving Clayman quietly wondering just how powerful Yoki truly is. For his final request, Yoki is tasked with capturing a thief named Evan. That evening, Evan uses a magical book to cast a sleep spell on the guards. Evan's companions, Jirash and Hatband, cheer at the success of the spell, knowing it will make stealing their loot much easier. They break into a storehouse and corner a man who is busy taking inventory. As they threaten him into silence, Yoki suddenly appears, dramatically announcing that he will capture them for their crimes. His flashy entrance is so over the top that Evan's companions immediately label him as strange. Evan scoffs and calls him a clown, ordering Jirash and Hatband to attack. The two rush forward without hesitation. Yoki calmly charges his blade with lightning magic, clearly intending to end the fight in spectacular fashion. Within moments, he subdues Jirash and Hatband with ease, forcing Evan to use the magical book to fight back properly. But it is effortlessly overwhelmed by Yoki's lightning magic. Yoki then slashes at Evan with his sword, knocking Evan to the ground, defeated but unharmed. The storehouse worker quickly thanks Yoki for saving him, explaining how important it is that he distribute Valentine's chocolates throughout town the next morning. He's surprised to learn that this world celebrates the holiday as well. Suddenly, a group of knights rushes in. Duke and Raven immediately recognize Yoki despite his disguise. Iridi, however, does not and demands to know who he is. With dramatic flair, Yoki introduces himself as the Black Thunder Swordsman. Yoki swiftly disappears from the scene. Raven quietly instructs Duke to order the others not to pursue him. Though confused, Iridi obeys when Duke commands the unit to focus on the unconscious thieves instead. He tells the knights to secure the criminals while he patrols the area. Unbeknownst to them, Yoki is still lurking nearby. Once Duke is certain that none of the knights can overhear them, he tells Yoki to stop hiding and drop the act of the Black Thunder Swordsman. He points out that whenever Yoki slips into that persona, he inevitably embarrasses himself and causes unnecessary trouble. Before leaving, Duke tells him to take a good look at himself in a mirror. Yoki removes his helmet. When he catches his reflection, his face instantly turns bright red with embarrassment as he fully realizes how ridiculous he looks. The next day, dressed once again in his usual clothes, Yoki collects his reward from the guild. Curious, he asks Clayman about Evan's group. Clayman explains that they were originally B-rank adventurers. However, after discovering a mysterious book, their behavior changed drastically. They became obsessed with sabotaging Valentine's Day, vowing to ruin it entirely. Meanwhile, at Cecilia's manor, everyone is busy preparing Valentine's chocolates under Sophia's guidance. Tio struggles to crush magical ore, only for Sophia to casually shatter it for her. Mikana notices that Cecilia is making an unusually large amount of chocolate. Cecilia explains that she intends to give it to the orphanage and to all the people who have supported her. Mikana gently reminds her that Valentine's Day is meant for someone more special. On Valentine's Day morning, Yoki wakes up full of anticipation. After checking his reflection, he perks up at the sound of a knock on his door. Excited, he opens it, only to find Teal standing there instead of Cecilia. Teal brushes past him to give her gift to Guy. She begins feeding Guy chocolates infused with magical ore, and Yoki awkwardly decides to head to the guild. Clayman arrives, proudly carrying a large box. The guild members gather around curiously as he reveals that it contains homemade chocolates from Sophia. He takes a bite and immediately declares himself the luckiest man alive to receive such delicate sweets from his wife. Yoki gazes longingly at the chocolates, only for Clayman to suddenly grow possessive and firmly announce that he will not be sharing. After being caught staring at Clayman's chocolates, Yoki storms off, shouting curses behind him. He heads to the knight's headquarters to chat with Duke, but Irene approaches with a box of chocolates. Instantly understanding the situation, Yoki subtly motions for Duke to focus on her instead. Duke obliges and gently asks if it's truly all right for him to receive chocolates from her. Irene shyly explains that she's grateful he is always there to support her. Duke politely accepts the gift and tells her she can approach him anytime. He turns back to rejoin Yoki, only to find that Yoki is already running away, shouting curses and jealousy. Frustrated, Yoki makes his way to the knight's dorm. He spots Happiness and Raven sitting stiffly across from each other. Raven looks relieved upon noticing Yoki, but Yoki turns and runs off, internally screaming curses as he retreats. Eventually, Yoki ends up at the central plaza where he notices a long line of girls waiting to give Yuba chocolates. Muttering bitterly about Yuba's popularity, he sulks until Mikana notices him. Yoki sees the box in her hands and asks if she's lining up to give Yuba chocolates. Mikana lowers her gaze and admits that she isn't very confident in her cooking. Yuga suddenly appears, wearing a hood and smiling warmly at the familiar faces. Mikana scolds him for ignoring the girls waiting in line, but Yuba casually replies that he was looking for her because he wants to receive Mikana's chocolates first. Flustered, Mikana confesses that this year's batch came out strangely shaped. Yoki stares in disbelief at the oddly shaped lump that barely resembles chocolate. Without hesitation, Yuba eats the entire piece, crunching loudly and declaring that he loves the flavor and that it wouldn't be Valentine's Day without Mikana's chocolate. Moments later, Yuga's admirers finally spot him and rush forward, pushing both Mikana and Yoki aside. Defeated, Yoki trudges back towards Cecilia's manor. Celia tells Yoki that Cecilia has gone into town, while Seek proudly shows off the chocolates he received. Celia offers Yoki some chocolates as well. At first, he is about to decline, but decides to accept them. Before he can even enjoy a bite, Duke comes rushing toward him with urgent news that Evan's group escaped. Meanwhile, in town, Cecilia is distributing chocolates at the orphanage when a sudden commotion erupts. A massive chocolate golem towers over the streets, controlled by Evan. Evan and the rest loudly declare that they will ruin Valentine's Day. The golem begins absorbing every piece of chocolate in sight. Yuga and Mikana are nearby and demand to know why Evan is targeting the holidays so aggressively. Evan refuses to explain, and the golem attempts to trample him. Soon, Yoki and the others arrive. Yoki instructs the knights to prioritize protecting civilians while he keeps the golem occupied. He dashes across rooftops as the massive creature continues rampaging through town. On a rooftop, Yoki strikes a dramatic pose and announces that they shouldn't try to destroy Valentine's Day just because they're dissatisfied with it. He admits that he once felt similarly and might have even considered something like this if he hadn't known better. Evan and the others mock him, pointing out that even he didn't receive chocolates. Yoki blushes and quickly insists that he did, though he awkwardly adds that they were from a friend's mother. The crowd collectively decides that this somehow makes him even more pathetic. The golem slams its fist into the rooftop, causing Yoki to leap onto its massive body. Using the momentum, he closes in on Evan. While Evan's gang proves easy to dodge, Evan is far more skilled with magic. Evan accuses Yoki of being just like them, someone who has no real hope for Valentine's Day. Yoki argues back that the day isn't over yet and there's still a chance his crush might give him chocolates. That statement enrages Evan. As their magic collides, Evan recalls being rejected on Valentine's Day. The emotional anguish fuels Evan's power, allowing Evan to overpower Yoki and blast him back down into the street. The golem continues absorbing chocolates, including Cecilia's box. Raven rushes forward to strike the creature, but Mikana stops him, afraid that all the collected chocolates will be destroyed. Seeing Cecilia's chocolates taken pushes Yoki over the edge. He demands they give them back as he summons an immense surge of lightning magic. The bolt strikes, and the chocolate golem melts under the overwhelming power. Evan falls from the collapsing mass, but Yuga catches Evan just in time. Upon looking more closely, he realizes that Evan is actually a girl. Evan snaps that girls can hate Valentine's Day too. She confesses that when she was younger, she made chocolates for her crush, but he refused to accept them because she looked like a boy. Since then, no one has accepted her chocolates. Yuga gently tells her that he would gladly accept her chocolates and would be happy as long as they were made sincerely. As Evan begins to blush and develop a crush on Yuga, Yoki feels conflicted, realizing Yuga somehow benefited from all the chaos he just resolved. But before he can sulk, Cecilia approaches him and shyly offers him a box of her chocolates. His friends casually mention that the cookies inside are delicious, which briefly disappoints him since that means they receive some too. However, when he opens his box, he discovers a small cake and a handwritten note with the cookies. His friends quickly confirm that none of them received a cake. And just like that, Valentine's Day becomes unforgettable for Yoki. One day at the guild, Clayman informs Yoki that a new request has come in from the Merchants Guild. According to the details, they are seeking assistance from the Adventurers Guild to investigate a case of missing cargo and possibly capture whoever is responsible. When Yoki hears that the port city is by the sea, his mind instantly drifts into a daydream of Cecilia in beach attire. However, on the day of departure, he is met only by Happiness. Cecilia had declined his invitation, explaining that she must remain in Minerva to attend to important business matters. Happiness bluntly calls him an idiot, and Yoki angrily agrees, admitting that he should have checked Cecilia's schedule before getting his hopes up. As they prepare to leave, Yoki notices feathers strapped around Happiness's waist. She casually explains that they are weapons she crafted from her own feathers. Just then, Raven approaches, surprised to see Happiness there. His embarrassment deepens when he notices that she is wearing the hairpin he once gave her. The coachman announces that they must depart soon, prompting Happiness to climb into the carriage. Raven quietly asks Yoki why she is coming along since this is a dangerous mission. Yoki explains that Happiness possesses incredibly powerful magic that could be valuable for this mission. Raven looks slightly troubled, realizing he didn't know that about her. Yoki reassures him, saying it's natural since Raven hasn't known Happiness very long, so it makes sense that there are still things he doesn't know. The carriage ride is filled with awkward silence between Raven and Happiness that even Yoki is bothered by. Eventually, they arrive at the client's port town. Yoki instructs Raven and Happiness to gather information around the docks while he speaks directly with the client. As he walks away, Yoki smiles to himself, secretly hoping this mission will help Raven and Happiness grow closer. Meanwhile, Happiness attempts to question one of the dock workers. Raven steps in and writes down their specific questions clearly. The dock worker explains that the stolen cargo had been heavily guarded, which makes the disappearance all the more mysterious. Because no evidence was left behind, the higher-ups began suspecting the sailors themselves. Since then, they have been treated unfairly and viewed as potential culprits. Happiness gently assures the man that they will uncover the truth. Relieved, he promises their full cooperation and calls over the other sailors. Soon, Raven and Happiness find themselves surrounded by dock workers, each eagerly sharing what little they know about the theft. Yoki returns shortly after, impressed by the crowd that gathered. Raven steps forward and explains that they've learned that the ships were heavily guarded on the night of the theft, yet no one remembers exactly what happened. Raven states confidently that the crew members are unlikely to be responsible because if they were lying, they would have constructed a far more convincing story. He adds that a few sailors vaguely recall hearing someone singing that evening. Based on that detail, Raven suspects the involvement of a mermaid. At the word mermaid, Yoki lights up with excitement since he has never met one. He loudly calls out to Happiness that they might encounter one. However, the sailors exchange uneasy glances. One sailor nervously steps forward and asks if Yoki's party can take care of the mermaids for them, making Yoki pause and wonder just how dangerous mermaids truly are. A sailor explains that mermaids are infamous for luring ships to their doom. Yoki introduces Raven as the commander of the Clarinus Kingdom's knights and promises they will resolve the mermaid threat. The sailors immediately look relieved upon learning that a knight from the hero's party is present. Later, while sharing a quiet snack with Happiness, Yoki reflects that to most humans, demons and monsters are terrifying by default. Happiness calls him a homebody and reminds him that it's only natural since the Demon King's army waged war against humanity for several years. Raven soon returns to their side and Happiness offers him the snack she had saved. He accepts it and after taking a bite, quietly comments that it's sweet. Raven then informs Yoki that someone has reported seeing a mermaid. While Raven was gathering supplies, a man approached him, claiming that the missing cargo had been found near a cave by the bay just outside the city. However, he also insisted that a mermaid was guarding it. Yoki immediately finds the story suspicious, but Raven states that they still need to confirm it themselves. He tells Happiness to remain in town while he and Yoki investigate. Happiness refuses, so Raven tries to persuade her, explaining that during the Demon King's reign, they failed to save many lives because their enemies were demons. He says it is his duty to protect the people, and that includes protecting her. For a brief moment, a faint smile softens Happiness's expression, but it quickly fades and she calmly refuses again. Without another word, she stands and begins heading toward the bay. Raven looks conflicted about her joining, but Yoki reassures him that Happiness is far stronger than she appears. When they arrive at the cave by the shore, they immediately spot the missing cargo piled near the entrance. Beyond it, there is also a lagoon that leads to the ocean. Raven is the first to notice movement beneath the surface and braces himself. Suddenly, a mermaid, Shiki, bursts from the water and lands gracefully atop a rock. She then opens her mouth to sing. Raven instantly orders them to cover their ears as her enchanting melody fills the air. But Happiness steps forward, uncovering her ears and singing in response. Her voice counters Shiki's song, neutralizing its effects. Seizing the opportunity, Raven lunges forward while Yoki casts a spell to make a path for him. Yoki also summons stones to block Shiki's escape route, and Raven corners her with his blade drawn. With tearful eyes, Shiki desperately pleads with them, claiming that her friend has been captured by humans and begging for help. Raven remains unmoved since he has seen demons feign innocence before. Tears silently stream down Shiki's face as she realizes she can't save herself or her friend. Disappointed by Raven's coldness, Happiness steps between his sword and the mermaid. Raven tries to get her to stand down, but Happiness maintains her protective stance. Neither of them is willing to back down. Sensing the situation spiraling, Yoki urges Raven to lower his weapon. He promises that he will never hesitate to defeat demons who harm humans, but something about this situation feels wrong and he wants to hear Shiki out first. Raven slowly lowers his sword and steps back. The moment the tension breaks, Happiness collapses to the ground, trembling as memories resurface of hunters once pointing their blades at her in the same way. Yoki kneels beside her and praises her courage. Then he quickly remembers Shiki and turns his attention back to the mermaid. Both he and Happiness promise they will listen to her story. Yoki enthusiastically suggests they begin with introductions. His overly cheerful tone earns him an unimpressed stare from Happiness, but he continues anyway, introducing Raven and Happiness as well. Shiki quietly shares her name in return. Shiki explains that someone forced her to hypnotize humans with her song. Normally, mermaids keep their distance from human settlements, and that was how she and her close friend Misaki had always lived. But during a violent storm, they were captured by humans. Shiki says the man threatened to harm Misaki unless she used her voice to put people to sleep. Since then, she has been obeying his orders. With visible guilt, she admits that she was the one who put the ship's crew to sleep the night the cargo was stolen. Yoki feels that she is telling the truth, but Raven sharply warns him not to trust her so easily. Happiness questions why they cannot give Shiki their trust. She gently takes Raven's hand and tells him to trust her judgment instead and that she believes Shiki. Raven exhales slowly before agreeing. He promises to reinvestigate the situation properly. They inspect the rest of the crates inside the cave and discover that most of them are empty. Raven theorizes that Shiki was likely instructed to put them to sleep so the true culprits could have an advantage over them. Yoki asks Shiki whether she knows where the mastermind's hideout is, but she doesn't know anything. Raven suggests they remain at the cave and wait, confident the culprit will return within the day. Before long, the very man who tipped Raven off earlier appears, accompanied by several others openly mocking him. Only then does Raven step forward and reveal himself. Shock flashes across their faces, but they quickly mask it, pretending concern and claiming they had merely come to check on his safety. Raven coldly asks the men if they are the true culprits. Instead of answering, the thugs begin mocking his voice. Raven's expression hardens as he understands the insult and what they are implying. He admits that he made a mistake by doubting the mermaid first when the real criminals were standing before him all along. Drawing his sword, he declares that he will bring them to justice. The leader clicks his tongue and orders his men to attack. One after another, they rush Raven but fall easily. Raven closes the distance between himself and the leader and drives a powerful kick into his gut, knocking him to the ground in front of his remaining men. Enraged, more charge at him, but Raven continues to overpower them effortlessly. Eventually, the rest panic and attempt to flee. Yoki steps in to block their escape, but before he can act, Happiness unleashes her magic, knocking the fleeing men unconscious in an instant. Raven stares at her in surprise, newly aware of just how powerful she truly is. It doesn't take long to tie the criminals up. Even so, they desperately claim they were acting under the mermaid's spell. Raven refuses to entertain their excuses and demands to know where Misaki is being held. They soon locate the hideout and hear movement from inside a large crate. Raven moves to open it, but the lid bursts outward as Misaki kicks it open herself. She now has newly formed legs instead of a tail. Happiness quickly covers her with a cloth as she is clearly not dressed appropriately. Misaki explains that they can switch their fins into legs, but they cannot use their magic. Happiness narrows her eyes at Yoki when she notices where his gaze briefly drifts and threatens to report him. They escort Misaki back to the lagoon where Shiki anxiously waits. The moment they see each other, the two mermaids embrace in relief. Misaki thanks Yoki and the others sincerely for rescuing them. She offers to sing them a song of gratitude, which instantly makes everyone panic. Shiki quickly clarifies that it will not have any hypnotic effects. Reassured, they listen as Misaki transforms back into her mermaid form and joins Shiki in song. Their voices echo beautifully across the water, carrying the ocean's gratitude. Suddenly feeling competitive, Happiness steps forward and adds her voice to theirs. The mermaids beam at her, impressed by her clear, powerful singing. Even Yoki is stunned. Out of the corner of his eye, he notices Raven watching Happiness intently, unable to look away. When the song ends, Raven steps forward and sincerely apologizes to Shiki for doubting her. In response, Shiki smiles and gently kisses him on the cheek. Yoki and Happiness both blush. As the mermaids depart, Raven stands flustered. Happiness pouts at his reaction, then suddenly turns to Yoki and apologizes before harshly blowing him aside with magic. She steps next to Raven and softly kisses him on the lips. Raven freezes in shock and brings his hand to his lips. Yoki recovers and is confused, but one look at Raven's stunned expression tells him that Happiness has kissed Raven. One day, Teal visits Yoki to deliver a message from Cecilia, though she happily admits she volunteered so she could see Guy. Her unusual composure feels suspicious, but Yoki decides not to question it and leaves them be. The moment he closes the door, he hears Teal scream in excitement, insisting that Guy eat the magical ore she brought as a gift. Guy gives her an uneasy look, knowing she always goes overboard when it comes to him. Later, Yoki tells Cecilia about it, teasing that Guy is completely at Teal's mercy. Cecilia tells him not to make fun of them, then fondly admits that Teal truly likes Guy. Seeing her smile makes Yoki's cheeks redden. His sudden silence worries Cecilia, so he quickly comments that the tea tastes especially delicious, which makes her smile again. When he leaves the manor, he looks back and reflects on how much fun he has been having with Cecilia. However, he realizes that he does not want to remain just tea-time companions forever. The next day, Yoki meets Duke at a cafe and admits that Duke is the only one he can rely on for romantic advice. Duke immediately assumes Yoki must have messed something up. Yoki argues that he did nothing wrong and proceeds to confess that after bidding Cecilia farewell the previous day, he used his invisibility spell. He secretly followed her and was surprised to see her training with Seek. She was working on improving her physical attacks, though Seek easily dodged her moves. Watching her train so earnestly made Yoki's heart swell with admiration. At the same time, he realized there were still many things about Cecilia that he did not know, and that thought troubled him. Duke bluntly tells him that what he did was creepy and calls him a stalker, even asking if he should arrest him. Yoki panics and reminds Duke that he came for love advice. Duke sighs and points out that Yoki is being incredibly passive for someone in love. If he continues being subtle, he will remain nothing more than Cecilia's tea-time friend. Duke stresses that understanding the person he likes is important, but firmly warns him not to resort to stalking again. Unfortunately, Mikana overhears part of their conversation and wonders if Yoki is some sort of criminal. Duke quickly takes the opportunity to leave, telling Mikana to take over as Yoki's confidant since she knows Cecilia better. Soon, Mikana, Raven, and Yoki are seated together, and Yoki begs them to tell him everything they know about Cecilia. Mikana immediately insults him, while Raven simply writes that he was forced to be there. Mikana grows annoyed that Raven continues to communicate through notes instead of speaking. Raven writes back that he only spoke that one time because it was a special circumstance. Refocusing, she decides to help Yoki since he once helped her. She explains that the heroes party essentially exists because of Cecilia. Yoki assumes that it is because she is the healer, but Mikana clarifies that Cecilia manages Yuga's overwhelming fans, calming crowds so the party can properly carry out their duties. Raven adds in writing that Cecilia also handles most of the party's logistics. She organizes plans and ensures everything runs smoothly. Mikana adds that Yuga tries to help but often causes more trouble than assistance. As she continues listing Cecilia's responsibilities, Yoki slowly realizes that Yuga appears almost completely useless. Mikana and Raven exchange a look before Mikana explains that Yuga's mishaps usually end up benefiting others and that his role as the central hero is still important to the group. Raven even nods in agreement. Yoki smiles at how fond they all are of Yuga before realizing they've strayed from the topic. They return to discussing Cecilia. Just as Mikana is about to reveal Cecilia's unique nickname, Cecilia suddenly appears with an ominous aura and remarks that they seem to be enjoying their conversation. Mikana is shocked to see her there and hurriedly explains that she was only sharing fond memories of their party with Yoki. Cecilia smiles ominously and tells Mikana that she would also like to talk about fond memories. She then asks Yoki and Raven if she can borrow Mikana and promptly drags her away. Once the girls leave, Raven apologizes, explaining that he did not want to reveal Cecilia's nickname. Yoki assures him it does not bother him, especially now that he has a better sense of what might trigger her irritation. Raven then invites Yoki to visit a certain place. He brings him to an orphanage and explains that Cecilia frequently does charity work there. The children immediately recognize Raven and run toward him, excitedly calling him the cold-blooded swordsman. One child approaches Yoki and asks if the Holy Mother came with them. Yoki is confused about who that could be as more children gather around, asking about her and whether they will get to eat the sweets she usually brings. To calm their questions, Raven distributes several cupcakes he had prepared. After they leave, Raven explains that he earned his nickname because he never speaks during battle, which gives others the impression that he is cold-blooded. He shares that Yuga is known as the carefree hero, while Mikana has two titles, the Guardian and the Eternal Friend. Yoki pieces everything together and realizes that Cecilia must be the Holy Mother. He wonders why she dislikes the name, but Raven does not elaborate, only stating that Yoki will likely learn the reason someday from her directly. Raven then asks Yoki what he plans to do next. Yoki admits he feels lost and does not know how to grow closer to Cecilia. Raven suggests accepting a request together since that was what brought him and happiness closer. Yoki immediately finds the idea brilliant, imagining it as the perfect opportunity to rescue Cecilia in a dire situation and let romance naturally blossom. Raven merely looks at him, unimpressed by his overly dramatic vision. The next day, Yoki waits patiently for Cecilia to arrive for their quest. Instead, Mikana arrives and informs him that Raven asked her to join the quest as well, since he was called away on another mission. Mikana quickly asks Yoki about his plan to show Cecilia his good side and offers to evaluate his ideas. Yoki explains that their request involves driving out undead spirits from a certain manner. Mikana smiles, noting that it is actually the perfect quest for Cecilia to shine. Yoki is puzzled as he had hoped she would be frightened of the undead, so he could demonstrate how reliable he is by protecting her. After hearing his full plan, Mikana gives him a flat look and rates it poorly. She scolds him for forgetting that Cecilia is a priestess whose specialty is dealing with the undead. With a sigh, she revises the strategy. For the mission, Yoki and Cecilia will lead the attack together while she provides support. Rather than trying to impress Cecilia with flashy heroics, Yoki should focus on building mutual trust in their abilities. Yoki brightens at the suggestion and agrees to follow the plan. Cecilia soon arrives, surprised but pleased to see Mikana joining them. She then reveals that she invited Happiness to participate as well. With the party assembled, they arrive at the front of the haunted mansion. Yoki momentarily forgets the plan and prepares to charge in with Happiness, but Mikana quickly scolds him and reminds him of their agreed roles. Yoki regains his composure and repeats the strategy that he and Cecilia will take the lead in combat, while Happiness and Mikana provide support and guard the rear. They enter the mansion cautiously. Yoki notices that Cecilia remains completely calm. When the first wave of skeletal soldiers appears, she does not hesitate to unleash her holy magic and swiftly purify them. A much larger wave soon follows. Instead of eliminating them with a decisive strike himself, Yoki uses a spell to gather the undead together, creating the perfect opening for Cecilia to deliver the finishing blow. After the battle, Yoki immediately checks on Cecilia. She reassures him that she is fine, explaining that the spell she used is a beginner's essential for her class. Even so, Yoki insists on resting for a bit and offers her some water. They continue sweeping the manor until only one room remains. Yoki pushes open the final door, revealing the undead king seated upon a throne. It does not move at first, but Yoki notes how imposing it looks with its crown resting proudly atop its skull. Cecilia calmly explains that the undead king is not much stronger than an ordinary skeletal soldier, though it possesses greater awareness. Feeling confident, Yoki boldly declares that he will defeat the undead king himself. At that moment, the creature awakens and demands to know who they are. It attempts to summon its soldiers, only for Mikana to inform it that its entire army has already been defeated. Yoki uses his magic to dash forward, dodging the undead king's strikes and knocking its crown off in one swift motion. The creature lets out a strange sound, and Yoki cannot resist mocking it. The undead king hurriedly scrambles toward its fallen crown and cradles it protectively. The girls are unimpressed by Yoki's taunts. Once the crown is placed back on its head, the undead king charges at Yoki with its claymore, but Yoki swiftly disarms it once more. Defeated, the undead king drops to its knees. Yoki turns to Cecilia and tells her she can cast Holy Circle to finish it. However, Cecilia steps forward instead and gently asks the undead king why it is so attached to its crown. The creature admits it does not know, only that it feels compelled to treasure it. Cecilia senses that it may once have been a real king when it was alive. She promises to purify both the undead king and its crown. As Yoki watches her, he recalls the time she invited him to live among humans. Gathering her mana, Cecilia casts Heaven's Round, a high-level spell that purifies the undead king peacefully. When the light fades, Cecilia sways slightly as fatigue overtakes her. Recognizing the strain of the spell, Yoki instructs Mikana and Happiness to sweep the manor one last time before returning to the carriage. Left alone with Cecilia, Yoki offers to carry her back. She allows herself to sink briefly to her knees but asks him to simply help her stand. When he does, she stumbles forward again, causing them both to lose balance. Without hesitation, Yoki lifts her in a bridal carry and rushes toward the carriage to avoid being seen. By the time Mikana and Happiness return, Yoki and Cecilia are already seated inside the carriage, positioned suspiciously far apart. They return to town, and Happiness and Cecilia head back to the manor. Yoki turns to Mikana and asks for his score. Mikana only smiles and tells him to forget about the score entirely, as if it never existed. She reassures him that he did well, deliberately not mentioning that she saw him carrying Cecilia earlier. Instead, she tells him to simply continue what he is doing, which leaves Yoki confused. As she walks away, Mikana quietly resolves to work harder herself. The following day, Yoki joins Cecilia for tea. Cecilia admits that she knows about his visit to the orphanage and asks him not to call her by that nickname. Yoki promises he will not, though he remains curious about the reason. Noticing the unease in her expression, he quickly assures her that she does not have to explain. Still, he tells her that he finds the nickname fitting. To him, she resembles a saint, someone always ready to extend her hand to those in need. Hearing that comparison makes Cecilia feel unexpectedly warm, and she decides to share the story behind the name. It turns out that Yuga was the one who came up with it. Since Cecilia was the responsible one in the party, he dubbed her the group's mother and kept calling her mother wherever they went. Yoki bursts into uncontrollable laughter upon hearing the origin of the nickname, much to Cecilia's embarrassment. One morning, Guy asks Yoki if he can help him find a job. He explains that Teal frequently visits him and even brings magical ore for him to eat, and Guy knows she has been buying it with her own money. Seeing that Guy is serious, Yoki decides to give him a makeover. By the time they arrive at the guild, Yoki has dressed Guy in a coat and mask to hide his stone body. Guy hands Sierra a sheet containing his biography so he can be registered with the guild. Sierra calls for Clayman, who appears annoyed at being summoned. He complains that he was busy, but Sierra bluntly points out that he was only staring at the lunch his wife prepared for him. Clayman becomes flustered before quickly regaining his composure when he notices Yoki's unusual companion. Choosing not to question the situation, Clayman simply asks why Guy is there. Guy answers that he wants to work as an adventurer. Clayman approves the registration on the condition that Guy remains under the supervision of the Black Thunder Swordsman. Guy receives his guild card, and Yoki assures Clayman that Guy will return tomorrow to accept his first request. With that, Yoki makes a dramatic exit. Afterward, Guy wonders why they didn't accept the request immediately. Yoki explains that Guy first needs a weapon since he cannot rely on dark magic. Guy thanks him, though Yoki declares that from now on, Guy will act as his sidekick. Guy immediately refuses the title. The next day, when they return to the guild, Clayman informs Yoki that he has a visitor. Confused, Yoki heads to the back and finds Cecilia waiting there, dressed as a nun. She greets him as the Black Thunder Swordsman, and when Yoki accidentally says her name, she becomes certain that the man behind the mask is him. Yoki tries to deny his identity, but after several failed attempts, he eventually gives up and apologizes. He asks how she discovered the truth. Cecilia explains that Sophia was the one who told her. Sophia had mentioned that the Black Thunder Swordsman had reappeared, and she began to suspect he was Yoki. Concerned about him, Cecilia decided to check personally. Yoki assumes that Clayman must have told Sophia. Yoki explains the situation, and Cecilia decides to help, since Yoki might make them stand out. Their current request involves searching for a lost cat. Yoki immediately begins interrogating the client, but his intense energy only frightens them. Taking the lead, Cecilia calmly asks the owners to describe the missing cat. Meanwhile, Guy watches and Yoki memorizes the owner's scent. After gathering the details, Cecilia produces a sketch and informs them that the cat has been missing for a week. Yoki explains to Guy that adventurers would normally ask around for information, but instead, Yoki decides to search from the rooftops. He leaps across the city while following the scent he memorized earlier. Before long, he finds the missing cat together with another stray. Since the lost cat behaves aggressively, Yoki casts a sleeping spell. He returns them to the owners and asks them to consider adopting the second cat. With that, he proudly announces the completion of the quest. Guy asks Cecilia if that is how quests usually end, and she confirms that they still need to report the completion to the guild. Excited, Yoki immediately wants to move on to the next request, but Cecilia scolds him for taking charge of everything. She explains that Guy will never learn to handle quests on his own. She proposes that Guy lead the next quest. Guy agrees, though he still needs help navigating the city. Their next request involves gathering herbs. As Guy works, Yoki explains that harvesting is a fundamental adventurer skill. Guy completes the task without any trouble and immediately moves on to the next request before Yoki can even finish explaining. The following quest involves goblin subjugation. Guy surprises them by effortlessly defeating several goblins on his own. Yoki proudly declares it to be the strength of a kept man, which irritates Guy. They return to the guild, where Clayman hands Guy the reward for completing his requests. Guy feels proud of himself. The experience also makes him admire Teal even more because of how hard she works. Guy vows to continue working hard so that he can someday repay Teal for her kindness. Cecilia and Yoki cheer him on and promise to help him again tomorrow. However, Guy declines, explaining that he wants to try completing quests on his own. As the sun begins to set, Guy leaves the guild. Cecilia asks if Yoki has any plans later. Yoki explains that since he is currently in disguise, he can get an A-rank quest. Cecilia asks to join, which causes Yoki to panic. He quickly tells her that she does not have to come, since she might be busy. Cecilia insists that she is free, though she wonders if Yoki finds her bothersome. Yoki quickly corrects himself and tells her that he would actually be happy to have her. Most of their time together has simply been spent drinking tea. Whenever they handle high-ranking quests, they usually bring a large party. However, Yoki points out that Cecilia is not well equipped for a high-rank quest. A determined look appears in Cecilia's eyes as she asks Yoki to wait for her. Not long after, Cecilia returns wearing proper adventurer's gear along with a hat and glasses to hide her identity. She introduces herself as Cicely, so no one can tell who she is. They begin traveling through the forest while casually discussing the quest. The request sounds simple enough since they only need to investigate some ruins. However, Cecilia points out that an A-rank quest is rarely simple. The ruins are located far from any nearby villages and there is no clear path leading to them. She also warns that they must avoid disturbing the ecosystem around the ruins, advising Yoki not to use magic. Yoki asks what they should do if they encounter monsters. Cecilia explains that the best option is to avoid them. To Yoki, all of these restrictions seem troublesome. Cecilia defends the precautions, explaining that the request came from an archaeologist affiliated with the National Research Institute. As the moon rises high in the sky, Cecilia announces that it is time to set up camp. Once their campsite is fixed, Cecilia begins preparing dinner while Yoki goes out to forage. However, Yoki's mind is racing due to being alone with Cecilia. Normally, such a situation would make him extremely nervous. Fortunately, the quest allows him to rely on his persona as a kind of shield. He returns to Cecilia and casts a protective magic barrier around their campsite before confidently presenting several edible fruits and plants he gathered. Cecilia is impressed but gently tells him that he can remove his mask since they are alone. Yoki stubbornly refuses, insisting that he must remain in character. He even demonstrates that the bottom of his mask can open so he can eat. Cecilia grows annoyed and calls him rude. Before she can try removing the mask, Yoki finally relents and reveals his face. Satisfied, Cecilia smiles and goes to prepare him a bowl. She serves him a simple but warm meal. Yoki gratefully accepts it, finding the food delicious and quickly finishing it so he can put his mask back on. He finds it easier to speak dramatically. He soon remembers that they need to wake up early the next day and suggests that they should sleep. Cecilia pouts at the idea of going to bed so soon, a reaction that nearly melts Yoki's heart. He quickly shakes off the feeling and comments that she has been working since the morning. Cecilia insists that she is Cecily right now. To tease him, she even imitates the dramatic tone of his Black Thunder persona while boasting about how capable she is. Eventually, they settle down for the night. Cecilia finds her thoughts drifting back to a recent meeting with King Daz, where she had once again turned down a marriage proposal. Daz warned her that despite her refusals, the proposals would continue. He also mentioned that the heir of a powerful noble family had recently expressed interest in marrying her. At the cave entrance, Yoki shows enthusiasm, but Cecilia quickly scolds him for being too loud. They enter the ruins and Cecilia uses a simple light spell. She explains that she will take the lead because Yoki's magic might accidentally destroy things. In contrast, she can rely on Saint Chain, a spell that can temporarily restrain monsters long enough for them to escape. However, Yoki insists on taking the lead. He explains that he can already sense where monsters are hiding and that he has many spells Cecilia has yet to see. The two begin investigating the ruins, passing through several rooms and passages. Suddenly, Yoki stops Cecilia and tells her that 13 monsters are waiting ahead. They hide and carefully peek at the next area, and Cecilia is surprised to discover that Yoki's estimate is accurate. Since there are too many enemies for her Saint Chain to restrain, Cecilia suggests finding a different route. Yoki instead tells her to trust him. When Cecilia's eyes are closed, he casts an illusion spell that attracts the monsters. While the creatures are distracted, he guides Cecilia through the path to the next room. Once they are safely away, Cecilia asks him how it works. Yoki explains that the spell makes the target imagine the thing they desire most. If he were caught in the spell himself, he believes he would probably see Cecilia, while Raven would likely see happiness. Cecilia thinks about what she might see and confidently concludes that it would be cake, which disappoints Yoki. Cecilia praises him and admits that she is impressed with his magic. They continue their exploration and pass through several interesting chambers from Cecilia's perspective. When they reach the final room, Yoki loudly voices his disappointment with the results of their investigation. Cecilia insists that the ruins still contain many rare mushrooms. Yoki had hoped to encounter something exciting like an ancient undead creature, hidden treasure, or at least a powerful boss monster. He is quickly scolded by Cecilia. Returning to her gentle tone, Cecilia suggests that they should head back. They exit the ruins through another passage that leads them to a beautiful lake outside. Since night is approaching, Cecilia recommends returning to their previous campsite to rest. Yoki tries to calm his racing heart. The next day, they return to the guild to report their success. Yoki even gives Cecilia a new title for her adventurer persona, which earns him a jab from her book. Clayman is pleased to see that Cecilia prepared a proper written report instead of giving only an oral explanation, which Yoki would have done if he were alone. Clayman rewards them both generously, and Yoki suggests that they celebrate. Cecilia agrees but insists that Yoki should change first. They head back to the inn, where Yoki notices that his room is unlocked. They are surprised to find Teal looking devastated. She asks what happened to Guy since he had been missing for 4 days. At that moment, Guy appears behind them. The moment Teal recognizes his voice, she immediately leaps toward him. Guy explains that he has officially become an adventurer and has rented a place nearby so he can support himself. She insists that she should still be allowed to serve him because doing so brings her happiness. Unable to argue with her sincerity, Guy eventually agrees, though he adds that he will repay her. The two become so absorbed in their reunion that they barely notice Yoki and Cecilia standing nearby. After they leave, Yoki and Cecilia find it amusing that Teal did not even spare them a glance. Relieved to finally be back in his room, Yoki suddenly becomes painfully aware of his embarrassing outfit, so he rolls around in embarrassment and moves to seal it away. Cecilia stops him and gently points out that while the Black Thunder swordsman may have several unappealing traits, their adventure was still a success largely because of his magic. Because of that, she would love to team up with him again. Hearing this makes Yoki's heart swell. He quietly puts the mask back on and accepts her proposal. He even promises that he will show her even more of his magic. 1 month prior, Raven had been visibly troubled by something, and Yoki quickly guessed that it had been a while since Raven last saw Happiness. Wanting to help, Yoki suggested that they accept a request together so he could invite Cecilia and Happiness along. Duke bluntly suggested that they should simply ask their crushes out on a proper date. His comment immediately flustered both Yoki and Raven, who were clearly unprepared for something so direct. Watching their reactions, Duke could not help but think that his superiors were completely hopeless. Still, Yoki managed to recover and declared that he would organize a group date that would give Raven the chance to spend time with Happiness. Eventually, the day of the outing arrived. Irene joined them as Duke's partner, though Duke clarified that she had agreed mainly to help support Raven. With everyone gathered, Duke called their attention and signaled that it was time to begin. Their first destination was a place that Happiness had been eager to visit. Irene quickly guessed that it was the newly completed tourist attraction in the city. The realization immediately made Cecilia and Raven uneasy. Raven hurried to Happiness' side, nervously suggesting alternative places they could visit instead. However, Happiness dismissed every suggestion. With no other option, Raven tried to physically block the path, and Cecilia also attempted to come up with excuses to redirect their plans, but their efforts proved futile. Both Yoki and Happiness, driven by curiosity, pushed forward, and the group soon arrived at their destination. Happiness was completely captivated by the stone figures. Duke explained that the statues had been built to honor the party that defeated the Demon King. Happiness observed how closely the statues resembled the real individuals, which only made Raven more self-conscious. She insisted that he should not be modest and expressed her pride in his accomplishments. Later, the group relaxed in a nearby park, enjoying street creeps. Raven and Happiness gradually grew more comfortable with each other. Duke and Yoki kept an eye on Raven and Happiness. However, during a particularly tender moment, a group of knights passing through the area overheard Raven's voice. The vice captain approached, offering words that sounded like praise but carried a mocking undertone. The other knights struggled to suppress their laughter, clearly amused by the situation. Raven felt himself getting nervous. Sensing his discomfort, Happiness stepped in front of him and firmly called the knights out. Duke also intervened, calmly explaining that Raven was simply enjoying his day off. The vice captain found the situation laughable, making a remark about how Raven was allowing lesser people to rescue him. He eventually left soon after. Happiness glanced back at Raven with concern. The atmosphere grew heavy, and Raven, unable to endure the embarrassment, suddenly ran off. Yoki and Duke immediately volunteered to go after him. As they searched, Duke explained that there was an entire faction within the knights who disliked Raven, many of whom had been gathered under the vice captain. Yoki soon picked up Raven's scent and led them to his location. They found him sitting alone on crates. Duke attempted to convince him to return, but Raven hesitated. Frustrated, Duke demanded to know what Raven intended to do about Happiness. When Raven failed to respond, Duke sighed in disappointment and left the matter to Yoki. Yoki calmly sat beside Raven and encouraged him to speak. Raven admitted that he felt inadequate. He explained that Happiness had admitted to having a secret, and the fear in her expression had made him believe it was something serious. He confessed that it reminded him of his own struggles with his voice and how his instinct had always been to run away. Raven then admitted that he envied Yoki, who seemed capable of acting normally around Cecilia. In response, Yoki put on a confident front and revealed that he had been so nervous around Cecilia that he resorted to wearing a mask. Despite his theatrics, he encouraged Raven to stand up, reminding him that Duke, Happiness, and even he himself all believed in Raven. Though dramatic, Yoki's words managed to comfort Raven. Not long after, they returned to the group, and Raven immediately apologized to everyone for running away. Happiness stepped forward and told Raven that he was forgiven. Wanting to lift everyone's spirits, Duke suggested that they go shopping instead. As they walked through town, Raven found the courage to speak with Happiness again. He expressed his hope that someday he would become reliable enough for her to trust him with her secret. A few days after their outing, Cecilia visited Yoki in his room, clearly worried. She explained that Happiness had gone missing. Duke and Raven arrived as well, and Cecilia shared that Happiness had supposedly gone on vacation, but she had left behind a note. The three of them examined it carefully. The message instructed them to meet her in the forest after a month. Duke seemed to have an idea of which forest she meant, but Raven could only focus on his growing concern. Sometime later, Yoki's group finally met Happiness near the town's entrance. She revealed that she had made up her mind and needed to tell Raven the truth, that she was a harpy. Duke expressed his doubts, cautioning her about the possibility that Raven might reject her. Happiness acknowledged the risk, but she remained resolute to accept whatever outcome awaited her. However, Duke added that if she revealed her true nature, their lives in Minerva could be jeopardized. But Duke softened his tone and reassured her, saying that he trusted her judgment and believed she would make the right decision. In the end, Happiness admitted that she could no longer keep lying to Raven. Seek was the first to step forward and embrace her, offering his support and wishing her luck. Duke followed, giving his blessing and encouraging her to do her best. Tears welled up in Happiness' eyes as she took in their support. Seek then urged Yoki to say something as well. Yoki simply told her that Duke and Seek had already said everything he wanted to say. Though Happiness initially pretended to be disappointed, she soon smiled and thanked him sincerely. Later that afternoon, Raven returned to the Knights' headquarters, where he was immediately met by the vice captain and several other knights. The vice captain greeted him casually, but Raven firmly responded, reminding him of his proper rank. The surrounding knights struggled to suppress their laughter, but Raven stood his ground. Despite his voice, there was an undeniable strength behind it. He sharply pointed out their lack of manners, his authority leaving no room for argument. Raven then accused the vice captain of disrupting order within the knights. It did not take long before they all dropped to their knees, asking for forgiveness. Raven wrote that it was fine before calmly proceeding inside. Currently, a month has passed, and Cecilia and Yoki talk about how it is almost time for Happiness to meet Raven. After Yoki leaves, Celia approaches Cecilia, her curiosity evident as she asks whether Cecilia has told Yoki of the marriage interview. Cecilia admits that she is not, explaining that she does not want to worry him any further. She insists that she fully intends to reject the proposal as soon as she meets the man. Celia sighs before asking Cecilia what she truly thinks about Yoki. The question catches Cecilia off guard, and she quickly insists that her decision to reject suitors has nothing to do with him. She then asks Celia to keep the matter a secret. Celia teasingly points out that if Yoki really had nothing to do with it, Cecilia would not have to hide the interview. Meanwhile, as Yoki nears his home, he notices Raven standing ominously near the entrance. Without warning, Raven throws a feather in his direction. Without offering any explanation, Raven tells Yoki to follow him and begins heading toward the forest. Yoki demands to know what has happened to Happiness. Instead of answering, Raven suddenly draws his sword, preparing to fight. Yoki's expression hardens with disappointment as he assumes this means Raven has rejected Happiness. The fight begins, and in the middle of it, Raven accuses Yoki of hurting Happiness, which momentarily confuses him. Yoki tries to calm Raven down, urging him to talk. However, Raven fights with surprising skill. Forced onto the defensive, Yoki partially transforms into his demon form to keep up. Seeing this, Raven recalls him as the demon on the middle floor that they could not defeat. Yoki attempts once more to get him to stop and explain, but Raven refuses to listen and charges again. Yoki knocks him back with a kick before casting a powerful spell to bring him down. He points out that the difference in their strength is too great, yet Raven still rises ready to continue. Frustrated and confused, Yoki demands to know why Raven is going so far. Finally, Raven explains that he made a promise to Happiness to beat Yoki up because Yoki was the one who removed all of her feathers. Yoki is stunned at first, then quickly grows irritated, especially when Raven prepares to attack again. Raven insists that he will use the back of his sword, but Yoki immediately kicks the weapon away. He then pins it to the ground with his feet, preventing Raven from retrieving it. Yoki realizes that Happiness is nearby. He calls her out, and she soon peeks out from hiding the playful smile. Both Raven and Happiness end up getting scolded by Yoki, who demands that they properly explain what really happened. Raven explains that Duke had accompanied him most of the way but left him just before the spot where Happiness wanted to meet. From there, Raven had continued on alone. As he approached, he began to hear Happiness' voice carrying a gentle, soothing tune through the air. He moved closer until he reached near the base of the glowing tree. When he called out to her, Happiness answered. She told him that the tree marked both her beginning and her end. At first, Raven thought she meant it was simply a place filled with precious memories. She thanked him sincerely for coming into her life and admitted that she had wished they could stay together forever. As Raven stepped forward, Happiness suddenly stopped. A strong gust of wind rose around him, and she descended slowly from above, revealing her true form as a harpy. When she landed, she confessed that she was tired of pretending. Raven could see the fear and pain in her expression. Instead of recoiling, he approached her gently and pulled her into an embrace. Happiness was caught off guard. She had fully expected rejection. Instead, Raven reassured her that no matter what form she took, he loved her. Hearing this, Happiness finally admitted that she loved him as well. After hearing the full story, Yoki loudly declares that it is far too sweet. Almost immediately after, his mood shifts to irritation as he realizes they had turned the situation into a prank at his expense. In response, he traps both Raven and Happiness in chains and casts a barrier around them before leaving. He then heads straight to Cecilia's manor for tea. Despite his earlier frustration, he admits that he is genuinely happy that things worked out. If things had gone badly, he would not be enjoying tea with Cecilia. Cecilia's expression looks regretful. She apologizes, explaining that she may be busy for a while and might not have time for their usual tea. Yoki brushes it off, saying that it works out anyway since he will also be away from Minerva for some time. He mentions that he has been asked to accompany Yuga on a mission. Cecilia is visibly surprised and for a brief moment slightly unsettled at how close Yoki seems to be getting with Yuga. Before she can press further, the door suddenly bursts open. Raven and Happiness rush in, both looking flustered and annoyed as they demand to know where Yoki is. Cecilia is left confused by the sudden chaos, while Yoki casually remarks that it is their own fault before making a quick escape. As he leaps out the window, he calls back, promising Cecilia that they will see each other again. Raven immediately urges Happiness to come with him, their hands tightly clasped together as they jump out the window in pursuit. Despite everything, they are both smiling. Even as he escapes, Yoki calls out his congratulations to them for finding love before disappearing into the distance. Eventually, Raven and Happiness give up the chase. Instead of staying annoyed, they find themselves grateful. Yoki screams in fear as he drags Yuga away from a crowd of enthusiastic fangirls. He pulls Yuga through the busy street until they finally reach a waiting carriage where Yoki shows him inside and orders the coachman to drive off immediately. Once the noise fades into the distance, Yoki complains that he will never travel with Yuga again. Due to Yuga's overwhelming popularity, they continue to get delayed, making it nearly impossible to stay on schedule for their mission. Meanwhile, back in Minerva, Cecilia stands before a mirror, studying the dress she is wearing. Though Cecilia feels like she should just wear her regular clothes to the meeting. Sophia then presents several pieces of jewelry, urging Cecilia to select some while reminding her that she must act and look like a noble. Despite the effort being put into her appearance, Cecilia feels uncomfortable with the situation since she fully intends to decline the proposal. Just then, a knock echoes through the room. Teal politely informs them that Cecilia has a visitor waiting. Cecilia finds Mikana waiting, wanting to ask about healing magic, but the moment Mikana sees her dressed so elegantly, she freezes in surprise. Cecilia smiles awkwardly and admits that she has been wearing formal dresses lately because she is preparing for an arranged marriage meeting. Mikana reacts with disbelief, then asks if Cecilia is truly considering marriage. Cecilia quickly reassures her that she is only complying with the king's request out of duty. She firmly states that she plans to reject the proposal directly after meeting her proposed partner. She then reveals that the meeting is scheduled to happen in 3 days. Her prospective partner is Soleil, a member of the heroes' party from Luminaria Duchy who has just arrived in the kingdom to meet with King Daz. On the day of the meeting, Soleil greets Cecilia politely in her garden, and the two of them have tea in the gazebo. Their conversation feels like old friends catching up. They had already met before during the grand celebration that followed the defeat of the Demon Lord. After a few pleasantries, Soleil speaks frankly. He admits that he understands Cecilia is not truly interested in marriage. Cecilia explains that her heart is still devoted to her training as a priestess. Soleil takes a sip of tea, then praises Cecilia, crediting her courage and dedication as key factors in defeating the Demon Lord. Cecilia gently reminds him that the victory was largely due to Yuga's strength. She then admits that Yuga would have deflected the compliment if he had heard them. The warm tone of their conversation gradually shifts when Soleil brings up another matter. He mentions Miller, a member of a different hero's party who has recently been arrested after causing serious trouble. Soleil admits that he does not understand why kingdoms continue forming new hero parties even after the Demon Lord's defeat. Cecilia agrees quietly, observing that a nation's desire for power never truly disappears. Soleil then reflects on the wisdom of King Daz, noting how he is working tirelessly to build friendly alliances between kingdoms. He explains that it is the reason why King Daz allowed their marriage meeting to happen. If Soleil and Cecilia are to be wed, this will solidify the relationship between their kingdoms and deter other powers from trying to overtake them. He hints that their union will bring peace to every kingdom, not just theirs. He moves directly in front of her, drops to one knee and proposes to her, shocking Cecilia with how fast everything is going. Meanwhile, Yoki and Yuga are at the mining site, and the miners show them their adorable little problem. Small, bunny-like creatures are preventing them from moving forward with their mining, and they feel guilty about having to attack or drive the creatures away themselves because of how innocent they look. So they hope that Yuga and Yoki can find a way for them to continue their work without harming the monsters. Yuga and Yoki discuss the situation outside the mine. Yuga wants Yoki to come up with a plan, claiming Yoki has been solving a lot of problems lately, but Yoki realizes that Yuga actually has no idea what to do and is counting on him to solve the issue. Back with Cecilia, she decides to decline the marriage. Soleil does not seem bothered by the rejection and reveals that he is also undergoing training to better himself. So for now, he would like to postpone their discussion about marriage. He shares that his form of training involves visiting different countries and learning about their cultures. He believes that by doing so, he can understand other nations better and that this understanding can help prevent wars from breaking out. So instead of marriage, he proposes that he and Cecilia meet often so they can share knowledge about their countries. Cecilia visibly relaxes and tells him that she also wants their countries to get along. She agrees to his terms as she finds Soleil's ambitions admirable. By evening, Yuga decides to tell Yoki about Cecilia's marriage meeting due to his frustration. Yoki reacts in shock since Cecilia had not told him anything. Yuga admits that he was shocked when he first heard it and had gone to Cecilia as soon as he learned about it. He had demanded that Cecilia should not have accepted the meeting. However, Cecilia told him that she could not refuse because King Daz had ordered her to at least meet the person who wished to propose to her. He grumbles that the man proposing is Soleil, who is said to be on par with Raven when it comes to swordsmanship skills. He then begins to rant about Soleil's other strengths while he is at it. As Yoki listens to him, he suddenly feels the need to see Cecilia. He apologizes to Yuga since he will be leaving and takes off running toward Minerva. He picks up speed once he is sure no one can see him. As he runs, he feels hurt that Cecilia never told him about the marriage meeting. Then he grows his horn and wings and flies toward Minerva, determined to talk to Cecilia. The next day, Mikana arrives at the mining site and tries to ask the miners for Yuga's whereabouts. However, Yuga is among them and is happy to see that she has arrived. Mikana notices that Yoki is no longer there, so Yuga reveals that Yoki left him after he told Yoki about Cecilia's marriage meeting. A flash of worry suddenly appears on Mikana's face because there is not anything Yoki can do about the meeting even if he were to go to Minerva in time. A little later in the day, Cecilia and Soleil visit the orphanage Cecilia frequents. They are carrying cookies for the children that Sophia baked herself. One of the older kids reminds the younger ones about their manners, so they politely ask for the cookies. Cecilia and Soleil begin spending time with the children, and the kids quickly warm up to Soleil when he introduces himself as Cecilia's helper. Soleil is puzzled when one of the girls asks him to play with her by lifting her high up. The kids are disappointed that he does not know the game, so Cecilia walks him through the steps on how he should hold and then lift the girl to play with her. The girl squeals in joy once she is up, and soon all the kids want to turn. Cecilia asks if it is okay for him to play with the rest of the children as well. Soleil's smile brightens and he promises the kids that they will all get a turn if they do it in order. By sunset, Cecilia and Soleil ride a carriage back home, and Soleil is thankful for the experience, as he has never played with children before. Cecilia wonders if that is not normal in his kingdom. He admits that he is not sure because he was never allowed to interact with others. Since he was a child, all he could remember was his father's strict gaze as he practiced his swordsmanship skills. Because of that, he rarely had the opportunity to interact with the public until he was drafted into the hero's party. There, he experienced the world around him for the first time and was surprised by how different people could be even if they came from similar backgrounds. Because of that experience, he wanted to protect people even more. Cecilia feels that she can relate to him well. She admits that she wants the same thing and also mentions that she had asked someone with immense power for help to protect people. She fondly says that this person has been proactively helping people even without her asking these days. She shares that she wants to be worthy to stand by him someday. Soleil reveals that he also has someone he looks up to, which makes Cecilia smile because she realizes that they have something in common. Cecilia drops him off at the inn where he is staying, and they both make a promise to meet again so Cecilia can show him more of her country. When she returns to her room, she realizes she is going back on her word about rejecting him since she has been entertaining him. She picks up a box and remembers Yoki's confession to Celia. He had told Celia that he planned on confessing to Cecilia again once he became an official adventurer and could live comfortably. She holds the pendant he gave her and thinks of him fondly. She knows he has been making many new friends and is currently living happily. She wonders if Yoki will be confessing to her soon since he has already fulfilled his conditions. Yoki is actually nearing Minerva, his heart aching as he approaches. He is about to cast a cloaking spell on himself, but an azure flame hits him, causing him to crash land on the wall. He is then confronted by a masked individual who calls himself the Azure Flame Steel Arm. The Azure Flame Steel Arm keeps pressuring Yoki to retreat and even questions his motives, making Yoki realize that seeing Cecilia will not really accomplish anything but cause trouble for her. He manages to block an incoming attack, but all the noise causes some guards to appear. They recognize Yoki as a demon and begin attacking him as well. Seeing that he has several people against him, the Azure Flame Steel Arm launches more blue flames at him. Since there are too many people attacking him, though regretful, Yoki decides it is best for him to retreat for now. Meanwhile, Cecilia quickly hides the necklace when she hears a knock on the door. Sophia enters and shows Cecilia a letter from her husband, and its contents shock her. As for Yoki, he retreats to the forest near the kingdom. There he wonders why he had to be reincarnated as a demon. Suddenly, Clayman's Shikigami finds him and shows him a wanted poster of himself as the Black Thunder Swordsman. It is the same poster Cecilia is staring at as well. She wonders what Yoki did to get himself wanted. The next day, the knights are briefed about last night's incident and how they need to ramp up security. It is Duke making the announcements and dismissing the troops. Finally, they allow people from outside the kingdom to enter, and despite the earlier warning, Duke and Raven do not deem it necessary to thoroughly check everyone since the description of the suspect had been clear. Yoki tries to act normally, but he keeps himself covered with a cloak as he tries to enter the kingdom as quietly as possible. Cecilia immediately spots him and is about to run toward him. Soleil finds Yoki suspicious since something seems familiar, but Cecilia insists that she knows that person. She manages to run toward Yoki, immediately fussing over his injuries. Yoki is unsure how to react but stops moving so Cecilia can heal him due to her strict and worried tone. Once the scratches have disappeared, she tries to ask him what happened last night, but Soleil approaches them, making his suspicions known. Cecilia tries to explain their relationship, but Yoki removes his hood and tells Soleil that they are acquaintances and that he is an adventurer who is often taken care of by Cecilia during quests. Soleil does not hesitate to introduce himself as the man who proposed to Cecilia. Cecilia panics and tries to explain things, but Yoki apologizes for interrupting their arranged marriage meeting and makes a move to leave. He does not get far since Raven and Duke appear by his side. They show him the wanted poster and begin dragging him away and help them with an issue. Yoki complains because he also has another matter that needs his attention. After dragging Yoki along, they return to his room where they meet with Clayman to discuss how the Azure Flame Steel Arm has been causing trouble for Minerva. Clayman explains that the man's actions seem noble. However, Clayman points out that the situation is creating problems for the guild. Low-level quests are important for starting adventurers, and the Azure Flame Steel Arm keeps interfering with those missions. To make matters worse, he never completes the quests. Because of this, many people have rushed to the guild to complain, which has forced Clayman to work unnecessary overtime. The Azure Flame Steel Arm is not even a registered adventurer under them. Clayman then adds that, due to his resemblance to the Black Thunder Swordsman, the guild's reputation could be affected if the public begins to confuse the two, which is why he demands that Yoki help solve the problem. Yoki agrees, partly because his reputation is at stake and partly because he wants to keep his mind off Cecilia for the moment. He changes into his Black Thunder Swordsman outfit and heads out on patrol with Raven, fully intending to make a clear statement that he and the Azure Flame Steel Arm are different people. As they move around the city, Yoki fixes the problems left behind by the impersonator by properly completing the quests and following guild procedures. Later, as he and Raven take a short break, they talk about how they both want to solve the case quickly. During their conversation, Raven brings up another concern, mentioning that there have been sightings of a demon trying to invade Minerva. Yoki becomes uneasy at the remark, and from his reaction, Raven realizes that it was actually Yoki who tried to enter the city in demon form the previous evening. Yoki apologizes and explains that he flew over after hearing about Cecilia's arranged marriage meeting. When he discovered that many people already knew about it while he remained unaware, he began to feel like he was nothing more than an acquaintance to her. Raven listens and then comments that he believes Cecilia cares about Yoki a great deal, noting that she seems happiest whenever he is around. Yoki says he hopes that is true, but he cannot help thinking that Cecilia and Soleil appeared comfortable and happy together. Meanwhile, Seek and Happiness serves Celia some tea at the manor. Celia expresses her gratitude to Yoki for introducing them, saying she feels fortunate to have met such kind servers. Seek suddenly realizes that Yoki has been gone for quite a while because of Cecilia's arranged marriage meeting. A little later, Happiness visits Cecilia in her room. After greeting her, Cecilia shares her suspicion that the demon sighting from the previous night must have been Yoki. She wonders aloud if Yoki somehow learned about her arranged marriage meeting and rushed back to Minerva because of it. She begins to think there might be another reason behind his sudden appearance. Happiness listens quietly before calling Cecilia troublesome. She reassures her that Yoki still cares deeply for her, and that his recent behavior is likely the result of feeling depressed about the situation. Hearing that only makes Cecilia feel worse. Sophia enters the room with urgency and informs them that the Azure Flame Steel Arm has appeared in town once again. Meanwhile, in the busy marketplace, a woman suddenly cries out as her bag is snatched by a thief. The robber's escape is abruptly cut short when the Azure Flame Steel Arm steps into his path. However, in his attempt to subdue the thief using fire magic, he accidentally burns the woman's bag. Panicking, the robber falls to his knees and begs for mercy. Disguised as Cecily, Cecilia scolds him for causing such a disturbance. Beneath his mask, Soleil immediately recognizes her as Cecilia, though he keeps his composure and tries to address the situation without revealing their identities. Cecilia firmly corrects him, pointing out that his actions have only created more trouble and have also damaged the reputation that the Black Thunder Swordsman has worked hard to build. Before he can continue, however, the real Black Thunder Swordsman suddenly appears, making his presence known to the crowd. Cecilia quickly pretends to be mad at him as well. Her reaction draws him to her side, and the onlookers begin to notice that the two masked heroes standing before them are clearly different individuals. Yoki steps closer to Cecilia and quietly asks why she is defending him. Cecilia answers that he has been working hard to repair the damage caused by the impersonator, and she does not want his efforts to go to waste. Yoki is about to thank her when Soleil suddenly launches an attack. Instead of counterattacking, he scolds Soleil, calling him an amateur for forgetting to announce the name of his attack before using it. Cecilia quickly tries to calm the situation and urges Yoki to stop provoking him. However, her intervention only fuels Soleil's frustration. Turning his attention back to Yoki, he demands to know who Cecilia truly is to him. Without hesitation, Yoki replies that Cecily is his companion. At that answer, Soleil clenches his fists, finally understanding the connection between them. His expression hardens and he formally challenges Yoki to a duel. Cecilia immediately tries to reason with him and prevent the conflict from escalating. But Yoki, now equally determined, accepts the challenge and calmly suggests that they move to a different location before beginning the fight. Once they settle in a quiet area, Soleil declares that Azure Flames are far more brilliant than Black Thunder. Yoki calmly counters that his title simply represents the fast and efficient execution of quests. Without another word, the two begin their duel. Yoki manages to close the distance between them for a short while. He commends Soleil for his impressive magical ability. Feeling insulted, Soleil launches blue flames in his direction. Down on the ground, Raven and Cecilia search the surrounding streets, trying to track their location. Not long after, Duke and Irene catch up to them and question who Cecilia is, since they do not recognize her in her current disguise. Meanwhile, in the middle of their battle, Yoki questions why Soleil keeps mocking him. To his surprise, Soleil admits that he actually admires him, which is why their outfits look so similar. He explains that he aspires to become a hero like the Black Thunder Swordsman, and he believes that he must surpass him. The two clash again, exchanging powerful blows as Soleil tries to understand Yoki's true purpose. He assumes that the flashy outfit is meant to attract attention and earn praise. However, Yoki answers honestly that he simply thinks the outfit looks cool. That unexpected response causes a brief pause in the fight. Yoki goes on to explain that he genuinely likes the outfit and has chosen to walk his own path while wearing it. He then encourages Soleil to do the same and find his own reason to fight. Before the conversation can continue, Cecilia suddenly appears. The moment he sees her, Yoki immediately drops to his knees and hurriedly tells Soleil to do the same. Cecilia wastes no time scolding Yoki for turning the situation into such a dramatic fight. She then turns her attention to Soleil and scolds him as well for causing trouble throughout the city. Soleil lowers his head and apologizes, but explains that he acted that way because he desperately wanted to be acknowledged. No matter how hard he tried, people refused to recognize his efforts. In response, Cecilia gently takes his hand and acknowledges his strength, telling him that if he uses his power for his own convictions, it will naturally benefit the public as well. At that moment, they hear angry voices rising from below as citizens begin shouting for the Black Thunder Swordsman to capture the Azure Flame Steel Arm. Realizing the danger, Soleil panics, fearing that his true identity will be exposed. Yoki quickly tells him to escape while he handles the situation. As Soleil slips away, Yoki steps forward and addresses the crowd. He announces that the criminal has already been captured and has turned over a new leaf, thanks to Cicely's guidance. He then assures everyone that all damages caused during the incident will be taken care of by him and instructs them to report their claims to Clayman, who is far from pleased about the additional workload. He then makes a flashy exit, sweeping Cecilia into his arms as he leaps away. The crowd watches in awe as he jumps from rooftop to rooftop, while Cecilia is left stunned by the sensation, realizing how much it truly feels like flying. Yoki eventually lands at the bell tower and gently sets her down. He removes his mask and Cecilia follows by taking off her glasses. After a quiet moment, Yoki is about to talk, but Cecilia begins speaking about the past, recalling how she had been fully prepared to die the first time she faced him. She then carefully asks if Yoki still wishes to end his life. Yoki admits that many things have changed since then. Cecilia tells him that ever since he arrived in Minerva, he has guided many people in a positive direction. Although Yoki insists that he has not done anything particularly meaningful, Cecilia gently disagrees. She explains that his presence has helped her as well, especially when she becomes Cicely. Hearing that, Yoki smiles and jokingly welcomes her to the world of Chunibyo. Even though Cecilia struggles to understand his unusual terminology, they fall into a comfortable silence as fireworks begin lighting up the sky. After watching them for a while, Cecilia softly admits that she always feels happy whenever she spends time with him. Taking a deep breath, Yoki gathers his courage and decides to confess his feelings once more. He acknowledges that his chances may be slim, but he cannot simply stand by and watch Cecilia marry someone else. Cecilia blushes as Yoki looks at her seriously and asks if she would be willing to be his. She meets his gaze for a moment before turning away, her cheeks still warm. Cecilia then asks him to give her a little more time. She promises to give him a proper answer after she resolves the marriage proposal and asks him to meet her at their usual spot afterward. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Yuga and Mikana share their concerns about Cecilia. Even though she has already said that she plans to decline the proposal, they remain worried that something unexpected might still change her mind. The next morning, Cecilia sees Soleil off after formally rejecting his marriage proposal. Soleil accepts her decision gracefully and holds no resentment. Before leaving, he gently asks whether she has feelings for someone else. Cecilia tries to deny it, but Soleil quickly guesses that the person she cares about is the Black Thunder Swordsman. Her eyes widen in shock as she suddenly realizes that Soleil had been the Azure Flame Steel Arm all along. With a calm smile, Soleil tells her that someday he hopes to meet the Black Thunder Swordsman again, this time without the mask. With that, he departs from Minerva, leaving Cecilia watching him go. Later that day, Cecilia shares the conversation with Yoki. For a brief moment, Yoki feels a sense of peace, relieved that things between them seem to have returned to normal. However, as the quiet moment lingers, he realizes that he cannot remain satisfied with the current distance between them. Summoning the last of his courage, Yoki stands up and confesses that he loves her. To his surprise, Cecilia rises as well and admits that she has also fallen in love with him. Yoki's expression brightens instantly, and the two of them slowly lean closer. But at the last second, Yoki surprises her by pulling her into a warm embrace instead. When they finally pull apart, Cecilia looks up at him with a radiant smile and suggests that they continue their tea party. Yoki happily agrees. Thanks for watching. This marks the end of the season. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed it.